Do careers in wrestling really ever end? Nope. No, they don't. Even when John Cena recently announced his retirement run in 2024 at Money in the Bank, CM Punk was talking about getting him to do one more match in 15 years' time. This is just the way. That doesn't mean sometimes wrestlers aren't given the most ridiculous of things to do, though, which does significantly hurt their careers. So let's take a step back and look at these things with me. Simon Miller, let's go. Number 10, Gary the Goat Garbutt. This was so weird. It all happened in 2019 when Roman Reigns needed a partner to take on Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre. Despite being the guy at the time, he went and found the local janitor who was indeed called Gary Garbutt. I mean, that just screams of Vince McMahon. Of course, this man from nowhere was also a high-flying machine. This is because behind the mop was indeed Cedric Alexander. He didn't win, although when he was defeated had a smile like, well, I almost got him. And look, if that had been a one-off, fine, sure, it's wrestling, have fun. The bigger problem is that Cedric has been with WWE since 2015, and this is what we did for the man. Doesn't really scream of confidence. Alexander himself has to feel it as well, because at one point he did ask for his release, but he didn't get it. So WWE knows he is talented, but still, they never do anything proper with that guy. Even in early 2024, we had that video with Ashante the Adonis, which is why I'm pleased to be talking about Cedric right now. Him and Ashante recently returned to NXT, so even though you can't see my fingers, know this. I am crossing them so damn hard. I like these two, and I finally want them to get their due. Number 9, Vince McMahon doesn't get the revival, which is mad, really. The revival in WWE became FTR and AEW, and look what they've done since. They're an all-time tag team. This was true in NXT as well and was accurate on the main roster. As we just said, Vince McMahon don't get it. It's likely due to the fact that the then boss wasn't into tag team wrestling ever, with many a wrestler saying he sort of looked down on it from an old school mentality, or at least a business one. Why would I pay for 4 guys when I can pay for 2? It meant even though the now Cash Wheeler and Dax Harwood were super good to go, they were even more lost on him. I mean, they were a classic tag team trying to revive the scene, hence the name. It meant soon we had them doing ridiculous stuff like falling over or having hot stuff put on their crutches. You do have to give them credit in the sense the revival always did everything to 100% of their ability. There's a reason they wanted to leave. This isn't what they wanted to give back. Much like before, at first WW refused this until they were able to get out, and I think this is a thank goodness too. They're just so good. They deserve the best platform to show it on. Number 8, Hideo Itami. This one just didn't work out. It's a shame today because, man, it would have been a different story. It is important to remember that this was Kenta we're talking about, somebody who genuinely changed the wrestling game. A lot of your favorites right now were inspired by this guy. I mean, who came up with the GTS? The real issue was Kenta had given so much to the industry before he arrived at NXT that he was pretty beaten up. And some of his matches were brutal. When he did make the jump to WWE, he then suffered a horrendous shoulder injury that kept him out for a year. Can't pretend that hasn't played a part in all of this. It has. The two eventually parted ways, and while Kenta is still having a good run in New Japan, it's not the same guy as before, and sadly that's how the world works. When you set your own high expectations, you become under even more scrutiny. You cannot take anything away from the man, however, because he is a trailblazer and a trendsetter. Basically responsible for why everybody does kicks today rather than punches. That was Kenta. Number 7, Nathan Jones is out of WrestleMania. So this is a true story, but trust me, Nathan Jones wanted nothing to do with wrestling. He quickly worked out it wasn't for him. I'm not surprised either because he got Vince McMahon, or when the boss saw how big he was, they called him up to the main roster long before he was ready. That's never fair. It's basically a death sentence, you only get one shot. To try and get him up to speed, he was paired with The Undertaker, which was indeed smart. Here was a big man who also had mad longevity. If you can get any of that magic to rub off on you, you're probably golden. Sadly, the opposite happened and the planned tag team match at WrestleMania was scrapped with Nathan doing a run-in instead, and then he fell over. Poor boy. The bad experience coupled with the travel saw Jones leave wrestling entirely and get into movies. If you keep an eye out, you'll actually see him a lot too. He has done quite well for himself. Number 6, the Bart Gunn KO. I'm still mad about this. I've got to get over it. It's just so stupid. It does go back for the Brawl for All, which means we have to discuss that again. Because yes, in 1998, the WWF thought doing a shoot fighting tournament was a good idea, even though it told you that the rest of the show was predetermined. So dumb. Even worse, the hope was Dr. Death Steve Williams would win the thing, and if that's the case, just work it. Then he definitely will be victorious, but no. We took the risk, and Steve got knocked out, good grief. Bart Gunn was the guy who smacked him, and when all was said and done, he'd also finished off Bob Holly, the Godfather, and Bradshaw. It was quite a good run. Instead of just going with it, management basically punished Gunn too, because he vanished from TV until he returned at WrestleMania to face Butterbean, who, yes, was an actual boxer. Guess what happened? Bart got rocked. It only took about 10 seconds, and the knockout is horrible, and that was that for Gunn. He was never given another chance and soon was released from the company. So let's never do this again. Talk about being dealt a bad hand. Number 5, Buff Bagwell. So this one was a big whoops. When WCW was bought by the WWE, everybody was on tenterhooks because we didn't know what was next. That went for the wrestlers too. Vince McMahon's big original plan was to revive Nitro, mostly to prove he was the best. Hence why on the July 2001 episode of Raw, we got a World Championship Wrestling main event. It was Buff Bagwell versus Booker T. Now, admittedly, this wasn't very good, but the other issue is that the WWF fans crapped all over it, but of course they did. For years, they had been told that WCW sucked. That was a real kicker. The match really was actually kind of passable, but this reaction killed it. Instantly, the powers that be were worried, and it got even worse when Kurt Angle and Steve Austin ran in to stop this. It just confirmed everybody's bias. The following week, Buff went about causing a right scene backstage, even no-showing an event when apparently his mother called in to tell WWE. Then he got into a big old fight with Shane Helms. It's hard to know exactly what happened here, but most agree it was Bagwell's fault. He was let go. It does seem like he had somewhat of an attitude, and as there wasn't many other options, we didn't really see much of him after this. Who does kind of feel like a wasted opportunity. Number 4, Hawk falls off the Titantron. This was offensive. Not sure there's another way to put it. But Hawk from the Legion of Doom was going through some very real personal issues at the time. So what did the WWF do? They made it into a story. I'm not sure that's a good idea. It got so bad in November 1998 as the man in question was teaming with new LOD partner Droz that, yep, due to his addictions and not being balanced, he climbed up the Titantron. Why did nobody stop it? We even treated this as some sort of must-see TV as Raw then cut to commercial as manager Paul Ellering begged him not to do it. Then when we did come back, Droz tried to save him, which somehow resulted in Hawk falling to the floor. This was horrible, especially because, again, the real person was dealing with addiction issues, and now we were acting like Droz pushed him. Who was this for? It really did mean the story for a while was, did Droz try to kill somebody? And poor Hawk. He never recovered from this, mostly because everyone should have been trying to support the guy instead. He never really found his momentum again, and even worse, passed away 5 years later. We really shouldn't have done this. Number 3, Mark Merrow's big contract. So there is a lot of chatter about this. Mick Foley has summed it up many a time. Basically, Vince McMahon was a big fan of Mark Merrow, and to get him away from WCW, offered him a guaranteed contract. These are commonplace today, but in the 90s they didn't exist in the WWF. When Mick and the likes of Steve Austin found about this, they felt slighted. They'd also been brought in at a similar time, but there had been no mention of it. You can't get mad at Mark for accepting, but man, this did not work out. While he was presented as the wild man, the Attitude Era was slowly creeping in, meaning gimmicks like this weren't clicking anymore. And actually what was clicking was things like his wife. Now that sounds way too crass, and I don't mean it to, but it's just the truth. Sable at Merrow's side became a fan favorite instantly, which was the same for The Office. As the audience got younger and younger, it was basically an attempt to turn it into wrestling's Pamela Anderson. It worked. You could even say too well, because it meant Mark became second fiddle in this pairing, and before long, Sable was a megastar. There was no going back. It was a shame for Merrow because he still had something to offer, but this was such a shift, his career basically came to an abrupt halt. Because he is the best dude, he spent his post-wrestling life trying to help others, and that really is what's important. All things considered, Mark sounds like a truly awesome guy. Number 2, Muhammad Hassan's last ride. If you do want more context about this, go and watch Muhammad Hassan's interview he did with Chris Van Vliet in 2024. You get the whole story. The short version is WWE just started pushing the boundaries of poor taste because, man, this was not good. It didn't start that way, as Hassan was meant to be a somewhat nuanced character that reflected people's own biases back on them. It did feel a bit too heavy for WWE, and yep, there was a reason for that. Simply put, as soon as they wanted to increase the booze, we just made Muhammad stereotypical foreign heel, and it was not good. Then there were those horrible incidences in 2005, which felt like we were trying to do a full-on terrorist angle. It's terrible. What made it even worse is that WWE aired these the same week of the 7/7 London bombings, and that was that. Everybody of note told WWE this had to stop. they were right. It brought us to the Great American Bash, where Sam was already scheduled to face The Undertaker. We basically used this pay-per-view as his funeral. Muhammad was chokeslammed through the stage at the end of it, and it was sold like that was it. He was gone. Over. He never returned to TV, and while Mark Kapani, who played the character, deserved a round 2 playing somebody who wasn't this controversial, it never ever happened. Instead, he took all the heat, was released from the company, and unsurprisingly, decided he wanted nothing to do with the industry anymore. I wonder why. Number 1, the Public Enemy get tabled. The Public Enemy were ECW's most over team. While a lot of people deserve credit, they were certainly 2 guys who helped establish the new wave of wrestling. Rock and Johnny Grunge were also big fans of using weapons, and so did so as often as possible. Eventually led them to the WWF, and let's just say maybe they weren't ready for the backstage environment that awaited them. It all began in March 1999, where it was going to be the Public Enemy versus the APA. Rock and Grunge told Bradshaw and Farouk they didn't want to take a table bump because that was their gimmick. They'd gotten over doing the opposite. Given that they had only just come through the door, the acolytes couldn't believe these words had come out of their mouth, so they went out onto Sunday Night Heat and killed these guys, almost literally. You can see it today, and within a few seconds you'll notice this is a real beating. Some of the chair shots. My gosh. Whatever was said, this isn't cool. It is the same with the Still Steps 2, and by the end, it looked like we'd witnessed an actual war. As soon as word got back to management, Public Enemy were totally screwed, and yeah, they were let go. They did sort of carry on back in their old stomping grounds, but I don't know. Whatever they had beforehand never returned. These days, most people just don't want to talk about it.
AEW has only been a company for 3 short years, but Tony Khan has already burned through some big names. Some, like Cody, went out with a memorable match that paved the way for All Elite's future. Others, meanwhile, were hidden away on lesser-seen programming. With that in mind, I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, and these are 10 precise moments when AEW careers ended. Number 10, Joey Janela. Bad boy Joey Janela threatened to break out as a success story in AEW. Early matches against Jon Moxley at Fyter Fest and Kenny Omega showed some faith from the higher-ups, but it was maybe never going to last. Months later, Janela sadly began sliding down the card. That continued until his contract expired on the 1st of May 2022. Joey's 3-year run came to an end before that date, though. His last All Elite appearance fell on the 1st of February edition of AEW Dark. There he lost to Lee Moriarty in a spirited back and forth. Spirited, but it was definitely obvious who was supposed to be the star of the piece. Janela got cradled for the pin, and as the ref's hand is just coming down for the 3 count, Janela's then valet Kayla Rossi realized the end was near from ringside. Rossi probably didn't know how correct she was at the time or how final that pinfall would be. Number 9, Chavo Guerrero. Chavo had a cup of coffee style run in AEW. The longtime ex-WWE star debuted on the 21st of July 2021 as Andrade El Idolo's executive consultant. This, on the surface, was a match made in heaven. Chavo can talk, and it made sense to put a mouthpiece with El Idolo ASAP. Yeah, it didn't really take long until Tony Khan changed his mind on that. Andrade decked Guerrero on the 10th of September episode of Rampage after Chavo had interfered in his match against Pac, which helped the handsome bugger score the win. But El Idolo dropped the legend shortly after the bell had sounded, and from there, Chavo went off to film Young Rock, and that was that, aside from some stuff on social media. Number 8, Marco Stunt. Unless you are Rey Mysterio, I think it's fair to say there are only so many times one can work the underdog gig before it grows a little stale. Marco's last AEW match came on the 4th of October 2021 episode of AEW Dark Elevation. He teamed with Fuego del Sol in a loss to Shawn Spears and Wardlow. My apologies. The 6-minute clash went a little longer than expected, but ended when the latter smashed Stunt with his finish and scored the easy pin. News began circulating at the turn of the new year that Marco would be gone when his deal ran out in May, and that proved to be the case. But AEW had already benched Stunt and replaced him in Jurassic Express with Christian Cage. Number 7, Jack Evans. Remember that head-shaving angle involving Jack Evans and Orange Cassidy on the October 2021 Rampage? Yeah, probably not. It'll be one of those moments in the B-Show's history that fans totally forgot about. But that wasn't quite the end of Jack's stint in All Elite. No, his final moments came in a fairly hot match against Dante Martin on the 1st of March 2022 episode of AEW Dark. Evans ate a painful-looking moonsault for the 3 count, and then his contract lapsed at the end of April. In truth, it felt like Jack's run ended after the hair angle. That totally came across like someone leaving the territory, so to speak. Ultimately, the story also did nothing for Evans's career. He slid further down the ranks before being released back onto the indie circuit. I suppose you could say it's a case of hair today, gone tomorrow. Number 6, Stu Grayson. For me, this one still stings a little bit. Stu Grayson was a big part of the Dark Order's business before his recent release, and his story is a bit of a quirky one. AEW taped a 12-man tag match on the 27th of April 2022. That was set to air on the 2nd of May edition of Dark Elevation. And it did. You know what else happened that day? Grayson's contract with the company expired and he left. Yes, he technically appeared on programming after he was already gone. Stu's post-match claw pose would be his last hurrah in the promotion. He debuted with a bang back during the first Double or Nothing pay-per-view in 2019, but opportunities had become more limited in the increasingly overlooked Order stable since then. Number 5. Awesome Kong. Awesome Kong had been cast as Brandi Rhodes' ticket to the top of the women's division when she burst into view during the summer of 2019. The deal with Kong seemed like a no-brainer. Her experience and star power meant she could help the division develop. Things, though, didn't really pan out as Khan and company might have intended there. Brandi's Dark Nightmare Collective story was, at best, flat, and Kong's looked less awesome by standing next to such a show. Finally, All Elite decided to pull the plug by having Mel and Luther of the Collective kick the crap out of Kong following Mel's loss to Hikaru Shida on the 4th of February 2020 AEW Dark episode. Security then marched out to help Kong to the back as fans applauded her efforts and figured a babyface turn was incoming. That didn't happen. Instead, she went off to start filming the doomed 4th season of Netflix's Glow, and then got released by AEW on the 1st of June 2021. Number 4, Big Swole. Here you can see Big Swole celebrating a 2-minute win over Ali Catch on the 21st of September 2021 episode of AEW Dark. That, as it turned out, would be her last celebration in a company ring. Things kinda, and this is a bit of an understatement, got a bit messy from there, and Tony Khan had a PR nightmare. You'd have to go back to All Out 2020 for the real beginning of the end for Swole, though there she worked a dreadful tooth and nail cinematic style brawl with Britt Baker that proved to be a dire start to the pay-per-view. After that, Swole only worked 3 more times on the A-Show Dynamite. Frustration took hold, and she went on to criticize the lack of diversity in AEW. The resultant beef with Tony has been squashed by both sides since, but Khan did say he let Swole's contract run out in November 2021 because he felt her wrestling wasn't good enough. Not only that, but this diversity row affected other wrestlers on the roster too. Number 3, Lio Rush. Namely, it affected Lio Rush's career. Rush took to Twitter and publicly called for Tony Khan to apologize for his comments on diversity in the wake of Big Swole's own remarks. That happened at the tail end of 2021, and it effectively brought the curtain down on Leo's AEW run. He wasn't seen on AEW TV after that, and the promotion let his contract tick down come February. Let's just say that any chances Rush had of an extension went up in smoke due to this controversy. But he did later say that he sat down to have an amicable chat with Tony about everything. But still, Rush's career in All Elite ended when he hopped on social media to pile on the boss. Rightly or wrongly, he was considered a loose cannon who wasn't nearly important enough on programming to get away with such behavior. One tweet was all it took, and Lio was gone. Number 2, Brandi Rhodes. The aforementioned Nightmare Collective idea must be considered as one of AEW's worst from the first 3 years of promotional activity, but at least the nightmare is over. Brandi's brawl with Paige Van Zandt on the 2nd of February Dynamite proved to be Rhodes' last showing on AEW TV. She packed up her bags and left both her character role and her gig as Chief Brand Officer, and together the couple officially departed AEW on the 15th of February. And no Number 1, Cody Rhodes. Yep, no prizes for guessing that this entry was going to be the one topping this list. The final year or so of Cody's AEW run will always be a talking point. Boos started to rain down on him during a 2021 feud with Malachi Black, and fans even tossed his weight belt back towards the ring on the Thanksgiving Eve edition of Dynamite. Things were not going well on the babyface front. Wheels were spinning in Rhodes' head backstage too. He's since claimed that Dan Lambert handing him the old WWF title, a belt his father had held unofficially in the 70s, reignited his lust for WWE gold. A now or never thought entered Cody's head, and he decided to make a grand return to Vince McMahon's promotion. Before leaving, Rhodes lost a fantastic TNT title ladder match to Sammy Guevara on the 26th of January episode of Dynamite. There, on AEW's flagship, he could be seen selling on the mat post-defeat. Cody's eyes darted around the place, but they'd soon be firmly focused on WrestleMania 38.
Do you want a really sad stat? In 2022, every single WCW career is dead. Now, this is because the company is no longer around, but a fact is a fact. There are some fascinating stories when you do get into it, though, especially with these 10 people. So here's 10 precise moments when WCW careers ended. Number 10, the Giant. It seemed inevitable that eventually Vince McMahon was going to go after Paul White. We all know how he feels about Giants, and he had actually said to people, "Hey pal, when I get that dude into my company, I'm not going to use him like they did in WCW. I've got a much better plan." Now we can get into that, probably on a different video. The jump did happen in February 1999 where he appeared at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and if you had been watching Nitro the month before this, you could probably see the writing on the wall. Because from nowhere, Hulk Hogan just said, "Listen, NWO, I know like there's a lot of people in this group, but there can only be one Giant, so later on we are going to do Kevin Nash versus the Giant." Kevin Nash won. As soon as we were done too, the New World Order jumped the future Big Show, and Scott Hall even tased him with a taser. And once again, just go look how White sells this. I don't really think he was that bothered, because he knew he was out the door. The worst part about all of it, though, is that this just came so out of nowhere and was never explained, which WCW did a lot in 1999. We've talked about it before, we don't need to do it again. Number 9, Scott Hall. Scott Hall mostly struggled in WCW, mostly down to his long-documented personal issues. And this is such a shame, because do not forget, when he arrived and debuted in 1996, he quite literally changed the game. Everybody was looking around going, well, why the hell is he here? 4 years later, he was main eventing Super Brawl 2000, and it's just a little bit sad. He is taking on Sid, who gives him a powerbomb to win. It ain't a very good powerbomb either. And Roddy Rowdy Piper was a special guest referee who counts the 1, 2, 3. But when this was done, and Scott walked his way back to the dressing room, little do we know, we were never going to see him in a World Championship Wrestling ring again. The crowd aren't into it either, which makes it doubly upsetting. So if you ever do want to go through Scott Hall's career, you can just forget about all of this stuff and go find his amazing moments instead. Great DDP. Greed in March 2001 was WCW's last ever pay-per-view. They were about to be bought out by one Vincent Kennedy McMahon, so they decided to go out there and have one last hurrah. It also saw Scott Steiner taking on DDP, and clearly somebody had gone, well, I tell you what was a good finish, WrestleMania 13 when Bret Hart took on Stone Cold Steve Austin, so why don't we just repeat that? And before you go, oh my gosh, that sounds absolutely terrible, you would be incorrect, and it was quite literally bloody brilliant. Because when Scott locked in the Steiner recliner onto Diamond Dallas Page, who did have the red stuff coming from his head and eventually passed out, once again you just looked at it and you were like, wow, Dallas, what a hero he is, I want to root for him. So this was such an excellent match and actually showed that maybe, just maybe, there was still life in WCW, but given that a few days later we had the last ever Nitro and DDP wasn't on that show, this was it for him, he was done. So I suppose in many ways maybe Page was already negotiating with the then WWF at this stage, because we know that he was going to make the jump early. And the less said about that, the better. Number 7, Chris Benoit. The last thing Chris Benoit did under WCW employment was to win the World Heavyweight Championship. I mean, that's kind of something. Now, this was a Hail Mary by WCW because they knew that Chris wanted to leave, so had decided, well, if we make him the champion and give him that big gold belt, there's no way that he would exit. And then Chris Benoit won it, and 24 hours later went to Nitro, handed it to them and said, yeah, I won't be on the television, I'm going home. And that really did happen too, so he was victorious at Sold Out in 2000, and then 24 hours later, Arn Anderson, who had been the special guest referee, had to walk down and go, oh, silly me, I didn't notice that Sid's foot was under the bottom rope, so now the championship is vacant, and we'll have to have a tournament to figure it out. This was awful, it was so bad, it was drowning in politics, and once again was just another way to say WCW was not long for this world. Number 6, Steve Austin. Given what he would go on to do, it is kind of crazy that Steve Austin had no WCW send-off. And look, I get that he wasn't Stone Cold at this point, but he was still a recognizable name. He had been in WCW for ages, and he had won flubbing championships. For your trivia odds, his last match came in May 1995 when he took on Eddie Jackie in a match that only lasted 1 minute, and there's still this rumor out there that soon after, he just walked out on WCW when they told him he was going to have to lose to the Renegade. Now, if you don't know who the Renegade was, he was WCW's version of the Ultimate Warrior, and yes, it was terrible. Steve also injured his tricep around this time, so given that they were at odds with each other, and when Eric Bischoff gave him a call to talk to him, he apparently heard Austin in the background going, I don't want to talk to that son of a bitch. They fired him. That's right, they faxed him his walking papers when he was rehabbing the fact that he was hurt. And as you know, for a good old while, there was a lot of bad blood. If you weren't watching on TV though, and you were used to stunning Steve Austin, one day, he just wasn't there anymore. I guess he couldn't be bothered. Number 5, Eric Bischoff. And speaking of the boss, he got booted off TV too. If you do want to know all the details, make sure you Google everything that happened between Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo. But the headlines are, they just all acted like children, and it sounded absolutely ridiculous. It eventually ended with an angle where WCW's Millionaires Club were taking on the New Blood, and any long-term fan was able to figure out this was just a rehash of the WCW versus the NWO, and by 2000, we had run that into the ground. You can see that Bischoff had enough by this stage, and after it had come to a massive head backstage with Mr. Russo, we saw him on television, he was all like, man, I can't believe DDP's not here anymore. And that was it. Poof. He only ever appeared via other people talking about him. And when the next year would roll around, WCW was gone. This did all tie into the fact that the promotion was having a terrible time and the finger of blame had been pointed at him. But never underestimate how crazy this was. He had been such an integral part. Now it's done before Goldberg. So this was just awful. Another terrible decision by WCW, despite the fact that Goldberg had basically propped up the company in 1998. I mean, you go through that 12 months and imagine that Bill isn't around. What the flub would they have done? I mean, they turned him heel in 2000 before realised, oh no, that's not going to work, so they hit the whoops button and then desperately tried to turn him back babyface, including at the Sin 2001 pay-per-view where they teamed him up with Sergeant Dwayne Bruce and put Goldberg's career on the line. Everybody, of course, just shrugged their shoulders and said, okay, yeah, we're doing that, whatever. But when Lex Luger pinned him, apparently Goldberg's career was done. Now, WCW never lived up to any of their stipulations, so he obviously was going to come back at one point. But again, you already know what happened in this year, so that was it for Goldberg. Lex Luger pinned him, and he was done. I mean, seriously, what an awful way to go out for one of your biggest ever stars. Number 3, Bret Hart. The reason this sucks so much is that when Bret left the WWF in 1997, it was terrible. And when Bret Hart left the WCW, it was also terrible. So I tell you, this man never got the respect that he deserved. Do go and find the September 2000 promo. He did indeed cut on Bill Goldberg and Scott Steiner though, because it will make you go, holy crap, the Hitman has fire in his balls. I mean, he is talking about the fact that the previous year, Goldberg had to retire him. And if you were a fan like me, you were rubbing your hands together because you assumed something big was on the line. Instead though, he was never seen again. In October, management terminated his contract because they didn't think he was living up to his end of the deal, because of course he was going through a lot of health stuff. And I will never be able to accept that. I will never be able to get my head around it. Bret the Hitman Hart just let go like he was nothing, as opposed to the best of all time. Number 2, Hulk Hogan. Talking of bad, my word. Now, we all remember everything that happened at the Bash of the Beach 2000 where Jeff Jarrett, Hulk Hogan and Vince Russo had that thing that was just offensive, and it did end somehow with the Hulkster being the world champion and walking out of the place. What we all forget though is that we did see him one last time on this show, and as it turned out, it would be the last time we ever saw him in WCW. But listen to this. He was walking backstage without the belt that had magically vanished, which just summed up WCW, and he walked past Vampiro, and they looked at each other. So, okay, maybe we're teasing something here, maybe we're going to do Vampiro versus Hogan. But no, they just both walked out the frame. And Hulk Hogan never returned to WCW. I mean, where was he going? Did he hate Vampiro? Did he need the toilet? We're never gonna know. Before long, too, Hulk would be suing World Championship Wrestling. And honestly, if you're bored today, just Google this one as well, and you will feel miles more mature than everybody involved. Number 1, Chris Jericho. One of the biggest jumps during the Attitude Era from WCW to the WWF was Chris Jericho in 1999. Although if you were in the know of the late 90s, this did not come as a big surprise because WCW had something with Chris Jericho and decided to do nothing with him. While his official last match happened on a house show in July, his last match on Nitro was a defeat to Booker T. And in between all that, WCW executives just rubbed their non-existent beards and were like, well, we know he's leaving, but we kind of feel like we should do something with him, but we don't really know what to do. The answer was to put Jericho on commentary alongside Tony Schiavone as they tested running pay-per-views on WCW.com, which actually means the last time a fan saw Chris Jericho on WCW TV was when he was commentating on Sting versus Ricky Steamboat.
Practically everyone was over in the late 90s. Yep, even this bellend. It is wild to look back on Raw or SmackDown tapings now and see fans going bonkers for Gangrel versus Al Snow. But it happened. Sadly, something else happened too. WWF careers had to come to an end, and many did during ye olde Attitude days. None of the examples given on this list are ultra memorable high notes either. In fact, you definitely won't remember how workers like Gangrel, the Public Enemy, kissed goodbye to an era filled with excess, raunch, cash, and ass. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, and these are 10 precise moments when Attitude Era careers ended. Number 10, Gangrel. Look away now, Andy Murray. The vampire's blood-drinking gimmick became less of an ongoing concern in 1999, but he was totally de-emphasized throughout the year 2000. In fact, Old Ganger's last appearance on one of the major shows was a 90-second loss to Taz on the 17th of February episode of SmackDown. After that job, Gangrel dropped to the C-Show schedule and became a jacked/metal regular. His final televised bout was a WWF European title crack versus William Regal on the 11th of November 2000. That was a wrap on the one-time Brood leader. Gangrel only wrestled one more match, a house show win over Midian, more on him later, several days later, before leaving the promotion in 2001. He's worked almost everywhere else since that near 3-year run as WWE's bloodbath-loving creature came to an end. He's even got his own sauce. Banging and banging. Number 9, Luna Vachon. Gangrel was involved in the end of Luna Vachon's run too. Together, the wacky pair teamed up to take on Prince Albert, yes, a walking penis piercing, and Jacqueline on the 10th of February 2000 episode of SmackDown. The whole exercise lasted less than a minute. Luna actually scored the pin over Jackie, but then got dumped outside the ring during some post-match shenanigans, and that was that. According to Jim Ross on Grilling JR, Vachon wasn't always the easiest to deal with behind the scenes. She was struggling with a myriad of personal problems and didn't see eye to eye with some of the women in the locker room. The WWF released Luna shortly after this mixed tag. Vachon, who was actually married to Gangrel for a spell, blatantly wasn't the future of women's wrestling in 2000. Things might have been different had Vinnie Mac been less, how can I put this, enamored with scantily clad divas at the time. But that was the priority. Number 8, Ahmed Johnson. There was a time when Vince McMahon told guys like Bruce Pritchard and JR that he could see Ahmed Johnson as WWF champ someday. The injury-prone wrecking machine did have natural charisma by the truckload, and he was popular with the fans, but it was just never going to happen. The boss had given up on Ahmed by mid-97, and things got even worse for Johnson as calendars trickled towards the new year. In February 1998, the muscle-bound Pet Project worked his final match at In Your House, No Way Out of Texas. His parting shot was hugging Ken Shamrock after a win over the Nation and then performing a few dance moves for the crowd before leaving the ring. That, as it turned out, would be the last time Ahmed worked on a WWF card. Johnson left to take care of his sister, who was in poor health, and later claimed that racism behind the scenes didn't sit well with him either. Number 7, the Public Enemy. To say they weren't welcomed by the roster would would be a gross understatement. Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock were literally beaten up by the APA on Saturday Night Heat, then ignored before losing to the Hardy Boys on Z-List programming like shotgun. Their last match for the Federation was taped on the 30th of March. By the time their clash with the Hardys aired, Public Enemy were already lining up indie dates and in talks with WCW about another run there. They'd never recapture their ECW magic outside Paul Heyman's cult-like organization. Number 6. Bart Gunn. Right, imagine WWE scheduled an MMA-style tournament today, told the workers to fight for real, and then punish the dude who won it because he wasn't the one they thought would win, Shane McMahon. That's exactly what the then WWF did with the disastrous Brawl for All concept in 1998. Bart Gunn hammered everyone in his path, but that wasn't supposed to happen. So after months of sitting on the sidelines twiddling his thumbs, Badass Bart was brought back as a sacrificial lamb for tough man boxer Butterbean at WrestleMania 15. He got his arse handed to him by Mr. Bean, not that one, and it was a miserable end for Gunn's once promising career. Seeing refs and officials check on Bart as he struggles to stay conscious on the biggest stage is rather depressing now, especially when one knows that he was being punished for his own success. Gunn did make some cameo dates after this, but nothing worth writing home about. Number 5. Midian. Then again, it could be worse. At least Bart wasn't bollock naked for the majority of his final few months in the Fed. Former devil worshipper Midian was repackaged as an exhibitionist towards the end of his WWF career. Naked Midian popped the roster, watching backstage on monitors, by invading matches in his birthday suit. And it was always going to be a short-lived thing designed to make people laugh. Midian's last hurrah on screen came during Chris Jericho vs. Kane at Armageddon 2000. The pair brawled backstage and stumbled upon Midian and Grandmaster Sexay for some reason chatting by some vending machines. Kane bumped into Midian, then he and Jericho battered the lower carder with a few punches. The company tried to rejig Midian again after this. He worked a handful of dark matches under his old Tex Slazenger gimmick, but then got let go just a few weeks later. Number 4. Vader. Losing to Edge would not be considered a bad thing in 2022. Back in late 1998, though, yeah, staring at lights for the Canadian hopeful wasn't exactly a promising sign for Vader. He did the job for Edge on the 11th of October 1998 episode of Sunday Night Heat, and then left the promotion. Vader did make a series of one-off appearances in 2005, 2012, and 2016, but they were gimmicky cameos that were never going to lead to anything more substantial. He'd been sliding down the totem pole for a solid year or so before that match with Edge. Weight gain problems had blighted Vader's reputation behind the scenes, and he'd been neutered by that 1996 feud with Shawn Michaels anyway. The one-time mega heel in Japan and WCW never came close to top billing after that, and most fans won't recall his final match at all. Number 3. Ken Shamrock. Wrestling magazines, newsletters, and message boards were busy with anticipation for Ken Shamrock's comeback in 2000 and in 2001. The ex-UFC fighter had returned to MMA in late 1999, but most figured he'd come crawling back to Vince for a payday or two at some stage. It didn't happen. No, Kenny Boy's final WWF match occurred on the 23rd of September 1999 episode of SmackDown. He lost a first blood bout to Chris Jericho on that show, then marched off to reignite his cage fighting career outside McMahon's remit. Shamrock would never return to the promotion, although he did show up again in 2002 as one of TNA's first major recruits. The last sighting WWE fans got of Ken was watching him spit up fake blood after a hockey stick beating at the hands of Jericho and Curtis Hughes. Company cameras cut from that into the next segment of SmackDown, and Shamrock was rarely mentioned again on TV. Number 2. X-Pac. Sean Waltman has become a darling, quite rightly, of the Nostalgia Pop crew during Hall of Fame ceremonies and Retro Raw episodes over the years. But his old X-Pac character was shelved over 20 years ago. In fact, Pac's final appearance as that gimmick was on the 8th of July 2002 edition of Monday Night Raw. NWO cohort Big Show helped a wounded Kevin Nash from the ring following their 10-man tag main event, and Waltman looked on alongside alongside Shawn Michaels. Fans had been booing X-Pac out of buildings for almost 2 years by this point, and not in a good way. X-Pac heat, still hate that, was coined. WWF fans just wanted the character to go away, which is ever so slightly harsh given his skills and star power. Number 1. Chyna. That is the face of a woman who doesn't want to work with other women. Chyna viewed her WWF Women's title reign in 2001 as a real step down from working next to the guys in the IC title scene. If anything, the former DX member believed she should be elevated up the card rather than scrap with Ivory and Lita for prizes management just wasn't really asked about. According to Lita, the pair did get on behind the scenes, but Chyna's face said it all after their bout at Judgment Day. That May match would wind up being the latter's last for the company. She tried to negotiate her contract for more money and then departed in November that year. This was a sorry end for someone who had been one of the most exciting and over acts during the rise of Attitude. Chyna was dumped in an overlooked division and then cast aside when she asked for something better.
One of the best things about the rise of AEW is the returning joy of a wrestler moving to a new promotion. If you experienced wrestling in the late 90s as WWF and WCW went at it, you never knew who was just going to pop up on Raw or Nitro, and it was a hoot. Lex Luger, Rick Rude, Chris Jericho, X-Pac, I could do this all day. Whereas money and new opportunities were a big reason for such moves, there are further stories behind such leaps, which means I'm Simon from WhatCulture. Hit that subscribe button for instant happiness, and this is 10 precise moments wrestlers wanted to jump ship. Number 10, Jon Moxley. Nobody should pretend that Jon Moxley or Dean Ambrose wasn't used in WWE. He was a world champion, a pivotal member of The Shield, featured on most shows. The problem came in the fact he was misused, and when the decision was made to turn him heel in 2018, that train came hurtling off the track. It was fine for a while as he feuded with old stablemate Seth Rollins, but when it was time to focus on Roman Reigns, he was wearing gas masks, telling us he was a germaphobe and that the fans stunk. That was one of his motives for now being an asshole. Some of the things he was scripted to say were also borderline embarrassing, and all of it left Moxley feeling depressed, angry, and that he should probably leave the company. It got to the point where he didn't feel connected to the product at all anymore, likely when he had to cut a promo while somebody jabbed a needle in his behind as he inoculated himself because, again, the audience were grubby idiots. You compare this to what he has been doing since 2019, yeah, I see why he needed to get out. Number 9, FTR. I mean, if we wanted to, this entry could be one sentence. WWE has never been that high on their tag team division, whereas FTR are absolutely obsessed with it. The end. Much like Moxley, they were featured heavily, but as Vince McMahon has always seen his promotion as one built by single stars, anyone in a duo was always going to get the other end of the stick. So even though the then Revival won Raw, SmackDown, and NXT Gold, as well as had proper bangers constantly, it made no difference. They still went into their feud with the Usos, and the major takeaway was ass cream. As the story goes too, after yet another letdown from management about turning the tag team scene into something that could main event a pay-per-view, Cash and Dax marched backstage after a match with the Lucha Brothers and said they wanted to go. WWE turned this down at the time with yet more empty promises, but you know how this ends. It became clear years of not really caring about tag teams was never going to change, and as soon as they were able to leave, they were done. Number 8, Cody Rhodes. This remains one of the best stories ever because it should serve as an inspiration for everyone. Cody Rhodes was booked as Stardust during the last few years of his WWE days, mostly because his brother was Goldust, so why the hell not? And as silly as this was, I stand by the fact Cody made it entertaining as he pranced around the place like a nut job, but he wanted more, as you would. The rumors were he was happy to continue this on one WWE show as long as on the other he could just be himself, but surprise, surprise, that never happened. He wanted to show that he could be a serious, damn good professional wrestler, and after releasing that list in 2016, I'm not sure anybody could argue he hasn't been a ridiculous success. It's kind of bonkers WWE didn't see this either. He had turned lemons into lemonade, no matter what. Number 7, Chris Jericho. A man we mentioned in the intro to this very video, it is time to go back to the 90s and World Championship Wrestling. Everybody watching Ted Turner's promotion during this period knew that Chris Jericho had what it took to smash it because he was consistently one of the most entertaining performers on the show. Problem was, there was a serious glass ceiling in WCW that no one ever broke through, and as the NWO feud continued and the old guard stayed on top, Jericho was well aware that the position he was currently in was the position he was always going to be in. And that's not to say the company didn't value him as a talent.
they just weren't gonna rock the boat. What really tipped this over the edge is when Chris manufactured a feud with Goldberg. He would pretend to get wins over Bill by demanding matches and then winning via stupid means like a countout. Goldberg had no interest in following this through, even though Jericho's plan was for him to be annihilated at a pay-per-view, and when WCW agreed with Goldberg, that was that. If the future Y2J was going to reach the apex of wrestling, he would have to leave, and in 1999 he did just that. I have a feeling that it may have been the right choice. Number 6, Chris Jericho. Again, even years later, Chris Jericho still knew his worth, and remember that, kids, it's important. By 2017, the man was a bona fide star, smashing it within wrestling and finding success outside of it. He could have easily come and gone from WWE for the rest of his career and always been at a certain level, but that wasn't enough. As Jericho himself told Inside the Ropes, what really sent him loopy was what happened at WrestleMania 33. At some point in time, the plan was to crown Chris as the Universal Champion by defeating Kevin Owens at the Show of Shows, and there was even some chatter this would happen in the main event. While that was always likely to change just because of the usual Mania madness, when the title was removed entirely and they got stuck in the always difficult second match spot, Jericho saw the writing on the wall. Despite his CV and constant connection with the fans, this was where WWE had him pegged and always would do. That wasn't going to do it for him, so he headed to Japan, changed the game with a match against Kenny Omega, and you know what happened next. Number 5, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Do you want the easy answer to this? Because it's simple. Money. They wanted more money and more power to them. It really is just that too. WCW had designed a storyline where they would make it seem like the WWF was invading, and to do that they needed WWF guys. This meant Eric Bischoff offered Scott Hall and Kevin Nash far more cash with fewer dates on their deals to jump, and as both have said time and time again, that's all they needed. This was business. Their contracts were also drowning in perks, the most eyebrow-raising one being the favored nation clause, or if anybody else was hired on more money, their pay would increase to match. According to Hall as well, he was offered this first, agreed, and then showed Kevin his guaranteed figure so that when Nash negotiated, he could get a higher rate, meaning Scott's finances instantly increased. And I'll just leave you with that and remind you in 2001, WCW closed its doors forever. Number 4, Adam Cole. Adam Cole is a star. He was a huge reason people wanted to watch NXT, and he should have been given a shot on Raw or SmackDown. It is baffling that WWE didn't even give it a go, and I don't care that he's small or whatever we're saying, size does not matter. If we go off reports, apparently he was offered a bumper deal to go to the main roster as his contract was coming to an end, but the ideas were nuts. The most controversial of these was that Cole would cut his hair and become Keith Lee's manager, and if that is true, someone may as well sign me up for a shampoo commercial, and yes, I'm bald. The point is, it doesn't make sense. There was also the issue of WWE employees not being able to branch out with the likes of Twitch, which Chugs was super into, and just look what happened when he shifted across to AEW. On day one, he was a main event player, because of course he was. Number 3, Bryan Danielson. A much more interesting tale because Bryan Danielson didn't really feel like he needed to leave WWE. In his own words, he loved the company, loved Vince McMahon, and would have been very happy signing a new deal and carried on as he had been carrying on. There was just something telling him that maybe, just maybe, he should branch out. This started at WrestleMania 37 when he was in the main event and felt nothing, which is a quote. At first, he assumed this is how you felt before you died, which is kind of terrifying, and when he sat there as a free agent and pondered both sides, he realized he owed it to wrestling to give the new guy a chance. After all, having two competing brands is good for the business as a whole, and he wanted to give something back. So as ever, Bryan was completely selfless with this and did what he thought would help overall, and he's probably having the run of his career right now. I mean, seriously. What a damn hero. Number 2, Mark Henry. Mark Henry had retired from in-ring competition and signed a WWE Legends deal in 2018. His run had come to an end, but he still felt like he could contribute in some sense, either as an ambassador or an agent. As long as he was involved, everything would be fine, so you know what's coming. As he said on Busted Open Radio, Henry was barely being called and felt like he was withering away in the shadows, even though he was actively asking for more. Vince McMahon clearly thought otherwise, so with a brand new company known as AEW waiting across the pond, Mark thought he may be able to scratch that itch over there. The real kicker to all of this, however, came on Raw, where the world's strongest man's plans called for him to be absolutely savaged by Randy Orton and to look like a super geek. I mean, WWE may as well have had a sign on Henry's face that read, "This guy is old and weak," and shockingly, Henry didn't feel like participating in such skits anymore. And yeah, I get it. This did feel really disrespectful. Number 1, Brody Lee. Luke Harper was seriously underused. WWE never seemed to understand what they had with the man, especially because he was a big dude that could fly around the ring with ease. No one his size should have been able to move the way that he did, and surprise, surprise, every time he was allowed to show this, like when he was in the Intercontinental title scene, fans went wild for the guy. He was great, simple as. Despite proving this evidence time and time again, Vince McMahon just didn't see it, right down to saying what he really should be doing is speaking with a southern accent. Harper couldn't do a southern accent, mostly as he was from New York. You can imagine how this went. Before long, he wasn't even being used on TV, so requested his release in 2019, and as was the way at the time, it got denied. He still turned up to WrestleMania weekend and had a great match with Dominik Dijakovic, but once again, the boss man didn't get it, and we were just stuck in Groundhog Day. It was ridiculous. Eventually, he was able to get out of his contract when he jumped to AEW and became Brody Lee, and I think the results speak for themselves. His role as the leader of the Dark Order was a hoot. Some of the matches he had over the TNT Championship were utterly fantastic. We all know how horribly this ended and it'll never seem right, but let's not ever forget that Brody Lee was one hell of a performer and an absolute legend. This is a real statement I am about to make. There are plenty of fans right here, right now, who will say the Ruthless Aggression era was better than the Attitude era. And there go the comments. Really, this is down to what period you grew up watching wrestling, because 9 times out of 10, what you see as a kid is what you love the most. That's how stupid child brains work. Given that a lot of folk were enticed in between 2002 and 2008, though, I'm Simon from WhatCulture. Please hit that subscribe button. And this is 10 precise moments Ruthless Aggression careers ended. Number 10, Mordecai or Kevin Thorne. Because they are indeed the same person. When you do see what old Kev looked like compared to Mordecai, it is quite confusing, however. This wasn't an Undertaker American Badass shift where there were traits that carried across. Thorne seemed to go from some sort of angel man to a new mettler. The crazy part is Mordecai only lasted a few months when he debuted in 2004, and then in 2006 in the birth of a new ECW, we were trying again with a vampire. Can't pretend otherwise. That's what it was supposed to be. Shockingly, that failed to get over. And then on the 6th of December 2007, he was randomly back on Extreme Championship Wrestling where he beat Jeff Lewis. And no, you're not meant to know who that is. It was clear this was meant to be an attempt at something as Thorne had new hair and new wrestling gear, but I think we'd missed the boat. He was off TV after this before being sent down to OVW for some reason. That didn't work either, and he was soon released. Number 9, Shaniqua. Well, this wasn't cool, was it? Linda Miles, as she was known on Tough Enough, transformed into Shaniqua after she made her way to the main roster before finding herself at the No Way Out pay-per-view in 2004. There she teamed with the Basham brothers, which makes this even more strange, especially as they were taking on Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty. It was a damn handicap match. You'd have to figure that WWE had decided they had no plans for Miles going forward, because not only was she the one pinned here, but Big Keish took his ass and shoved it right in her face. Yep, that was her parting gift. Honestly. Almost as soon as the show was over, her contract was terminated and we never saw her again. Kind of felt like there was more to do here, or at least to give her another shot. But what do I know? Nothing. Number 8, Chuck Palumbo. I think if we had just given Chuck Palumbo one gimmick and pushed him, he would have done alright. Always liked him. Instead, we gave him every single character under the sun, including being 1/2 billion Chuck, which has aged terribly, before just going, nah man, he a greased up biker. Like we had gone back to 1996. Was this persona where his ride, ironically, came to an end because he lost to Matt Hardy on the 13th of June 2008 SmackDown, worked some house matches before he fell away entirely. It was so bizarre because Palumbo had been a mainstay for ages, and in November he was cut. I wouldn't call it a massive surprise because it was obvious he wasn't going to leave his mark in WWE. I think Chucky knew this too. He set up a bunch of business ventures outside the wrestling bubble and segued into those. Smart cookie. Number 7, Lance Cade. So this is a sad story as Lance Cade would pass away a couple of years after this. But on the 6th of October 2008 Raw, the Cowboy found himself intertwined in the Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho feud. Y2J had hired the big man to beat the crap out of Michaels in a no DQ match. Failed massively. Shawn just smashed him with a chair and fired up on this guy before leaving him laying. The interesting part was this was Cade's last match, and he went out going against the guy who trained him. Like many of this list, he had a few house show appearances afterwards, but when he suffered a seizure on a flight, he was let go. One would assume this was drug related as that was the cause of death in 2010, but still, tragic tale. hopefully one we can all learn from. Number 6, Jazz. Jazz was ahead of her time, at least from a WWE perspective. A total badass. If she was in the women's division today, she would be the dominant heel champion nobody could touch. And she did get a couple of runs with the title after joining in 2001. By 2004, nothing much was happening. She left. That was probably for the best, all things considered, especially as 2 years later, WWE wanted to bring her back. There was more competition, especially as on the 7th of June, she was put in a match against Mickie James. You know the deal. That went 2 minutes. Jazz lost. Really, this was over before it started because she was released just a few months after this, and that was that. Talk about not knowing what you had. I doubt Jazz was ever going to become the best of all time, but seriously, could have been used so much better than this. Number 5, Snitsky. And remember, none of this was his fault. A truly bizarre performer all around, Snitsky seemed to be everything Vince McMahon wanted in the Ruthless Aggression era. To be fair to the dude, he did everything he asked to the best of his ability. Maybe he was too agreeable, because throughout his tenure, he was presented as somebody who wanted to punt babies, yes I said that, as well as a guy who had a foot fetish. That stuff got way out of control too. Snits would walk around just desperate to be near people's feet. His last showing came on the 24th of November 2008 Raw, where amazingly he lost in the Intercontinental Title Contender Tournament to none other than CM Punk. This must have set something off with his head as he asked for his release. He got it and was out by December. I suppose his last big attempt to break through was when he changed his look and shaved his head. Come on now. Once you've gone the toe route, you are done. Number 4, Dawn Marie. WWE did not treat Dawn Marie well at all. She was discarded during her maternity leave, but was able to walk to the ring with Lance Storm at ECW One Night Stand 2005. They had been a pairing back in the day, so it made sense, and Marie watched on as Storm and Chris Jericho went at it. This was just the ultimate nostalgia ride for anyone who had followed their careers. So you can jot this one down as her last live show appearance, but Dawn actually popped up again on the 19th of June episode of Bite This. The problem with that is trying to find that footage is impossible. Maybe I made it up. Either way, it's probably not the best idea to release people when they go away to have a baby. Doesn't seem cool at all. Number 3, Orlando Jordan. The 13th of May 2006 Velocity is where you will find Orlando Jordan going against Gunnar Scott. You may remember him from his Ring of Honor run a few years later, and he would serve as the last opponent for Jordan, who was fired 2 weeks after this. Sheesh. What's really crazy about it is just over a year prior, Orlando was smashing it. It was the 3rd of March 2005 SmackDown where he beat John Cena for the US title, and he held that for 171 days. This wasn't just some fluke, we were giving him a go. He also feuded with the likes of Chris Benoit, but none of that felt real when he lost to Gunnar on what was essentially a B show. It certainly seems like this was a punishment due to poor behavior backstage, but still, when you're watching him you don't know that. Felt like such a fall from grace. Never saw him in WWE again. Number 2, Heidenreich. Just one of the weirdest wrestlers ever is Heidenreich. It's hard to find one person who was a supporter of the man, and even if you were, he was so odd that quickly changed. Remember when he insisted he wanted to do bad things to Michael Cole? No. That didn't stop the powers that be deciding he should be part of the new Legion of Doom alongside Animal, but that didn't work at all. Heidenreich wasn't Hawk, the fans wanted Hawk, so where was Hawk? It was even more painful because Hawk had actually passed away in 2003, and this is how Mr. Reich bowed out. He appeared on Velocity with Animal on the 31st of December 2005, and it is yet another hard match to find because it's not on the network. The pair did defeat Nunzio and Vito on this night, however, and that was that. I'd like a documentary about this guy, just don't get it. Number 1, Muhammad Hassan. Who else, right? Even if you bring in other eras, few wrestlers have had an exit like this. The whole thing was a mess. It is mad that WWE thought casting Hassan as a post 9/11 terrorist was a good idea, especially because it didn't start that way. There was more nuance to begin with, as Muhammad would claim he was being wrongfully profiled due to the tragedy, and then in July 2005 on SmackDown, he quite literally acted like he was committing an act of terrorism. It was appalling. It also coincided with the very real London bombings, which made it even more distasteful, and unsurprisingly, those above WWE said that this persona had to be written off TV ASAP. Can't really argue with that. It meant his last appearance came at the Great American Bash against The Undertaker, when the dead man took Hassan and powerbombed him through the stage to the floor below. This was played up like he was dead, never saw him again. Mark Kapani was sent back to developmental, but the poor man never stood a chance. How do you get past this? The answer is you don't. but he was released. The end.
If you're to listen to the myriad of expose podcasts, interviews, or backstage documentaries that focus on the highs and crushing lows of the wrestling industry, you'll often find one common thread that connects nearly every talent across any of the big brands, and that is that wrestlers are often tasked with putting up with a ton of very silly bollocks. Be it terrible gimmick changes, bizarre booking, or just some asinine requests by the higher-ups to go against everything that made them stars in the first place, it seems that you need the patience of a saint to get anywhere these days. However, everyone has their limits, everyone has their breaking point, and sometimes these horribly fascinating moments are caught on camera and are witnessed by millions. So let's take a look at this gallery of pain today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 exact moments that wrestlers died inside. Number 10, Braden Walker. So it's no surprise to hear, but WWE scripting is terrible. It's actually been terrible for years, decades even, and yet somehow people are still disappointed. Now statistically, the WWE is going to f*** up way more than they create anything of worth, hence why Mandy Rose's hair got more main roster screen time than Mustafa Ali recently. So poor old Braden Walker was on the front line when it came to dealing with terrible dialogue, as his debut segment actually marked the moment that he died inside. Knock knock, who's there? Braden Walker, and I'm gonna knock your brains out. That exchange killed Walker so hard that he never recovered. Honestly, no wonder he came down to the ring with his hands on his hips. The lad was visibly seething at how he'd been treated. Number 9, Bayley. The WWE system has a way of defeating its talent off-screen while they go 50-50 on it. In a peak of this development, the system battered the spirit of Bayley into oblivion in 2017, and the whole thing was actually just depressing to watch. Bayley was booked to lose to Alexa Bliss in a kendo stick on a pole match at Extreme Rules. This was a disaster in which the Bayley character, a WWE superfan, would not use a weapon to win. In that one moment, it exposed her character as, well, utterly stupid to think that at no point that she'd have to resort to weapons to win in a company that seems to use this as a device every other bloody match. What made matters worse was that in an interview with Corey Graves, she was given the script to justify why she was behaving so strangely, and she delivered it with all the passion of a coma patient. A lack of confidence and a severely defeated expression spoke volumes to the utter garbage that she was given to peddle. Poor Bayley. Number 8, Simon Gotch. So here's an obvious fact. Simon Gotch hates Enzo Amore. He buried him to the core of the earth in a 2018 RF video shoot, claiming that Enzo Amore was a f***ing abortion, and was so incompetent at and ignorant of wrestling that he broke his leg trying to counter a wrist lock and thought that Kalisto was Manny Fernandez. Gotch was scathing in his assessment of his former NXT colleague, to a level even beyond Amore's notoriously abrasive behavior would seem to justify, and the why might have actually revealed itself when Enzo responded a year later. The story as Enzo tells it, and remember he's a narrator about as reliable as the guy from the Telltale Heart, is that he absolutely eviscerated Gotch in a promo class with such devastation that Gotch never recovered. According to Enzo, and again possibly not even true, Gotch was wearing his Andre the Giant singlet, and Enzo preyed on it. He said, "Simon Gotch has got a pair of titties like a 65-year-old woman, how you doing?" And apparently he said that to a huge pap. Kid died in his mind right there, Enzo claimed. Now, we haven't heard any response from Gotch at this point, but once all of this craziness is over, we should demand that he tells his side of the story, don't you think? Number 7, Hulk Hogan. To confirm that Hulk Hogan exists in a fantasy world, he got himself completely worked up over some fantasy booking at the 2006 WWE Hall of Fame. Steve Austin inducted Bret Hart into that year's class. As he was introduced by host Jerry Lawler, the fans in attendance buzzed at the rare sight of Austin and Hulk Hogan together, who was there to induct his good friend Mean Gene Okerlund. They erupted in chants of Austin, Hogan, in an apparent attempt to will a dream match into existence. And Austin, playing along, said, "It's funny, I was going through my bag in the back and I found a can of whoop-ass and it had Hulk Hogan's name on it." The crowd popped large. Austin was the babyface in this dream match, and Hogan, well, he could not have looked more pissed off. Hogan had a face like a slapped ass all night long after, which normally he might have enjoyed were it Brooks slathered in tanning lotion, but it was actually his own, and he was absolutely pig sick at the thought of anybody else enjoying the spotlight for once. Number 6, Bret Hart. At Survivor Series 1990, 1997, Bret Hart, screwed out of the WWF title on his way out of the company, wrote the letters WCW in the air. Meant as a defiant gesture, he looked absolutely defeated. There was no real conviction behind his body language. He visibly did not want to go, and the reason why immediately revealed itself. He debuted at Starrcade 97 as a special guest referee. He had questioned whether WCW would know how to book a wrestler of his standing, and LOL WCW being LOL WCW answered that question quite literally. Contractually, he wasn't able to immediately wrestle for WCW, but there were a million different means of introducing him to the company. Precisely 1 million of those reasons benefited from the anticipation, and it's not as if, as shown through Sting's year, they shouldn't have built it. WCW booked WWF loyalist Bret Hart like a WCW fan, and not like an incoming superstar, because the NWO at this point was just way cooler, bro. A multifarious regulation before he was even promoted, Hart's WCW run was doomed to fail. And as Eric Bischoff pointed out much later, he definitely lost his smile. Number 5. Paul Heyman. At the finish of December to Dismember's Extreme Elimination Chamber match, Paul Heyman's man didn't win. WWE developmental prospect Bobby Lashley last defeated WCW and WWE stalwart The Big Show for the ECW Heavyweight Championship. To sell this, Heyman stood ringside and covered his face with his hands in dejection. He was, at the very least, method acting. The disaster of a show was the culmination of a disastrous reboot. The ECW brand had mutated into just another WWE property, and while it was insane to expect something resembling the old days that fans really wanted, we were just hoping for something, anything a little bit different. And we did get glimmers of hope, but they were immediately stamped out by Vince trying to put over his own stars on a brand that wasn't actually intended for them. Heyman therefore had to watch his dream die twice over thanks to McMahon, and after a legendary blowout with Vince, Heyman didn't even make it to the next TV taping. Number 4. Gail Kim. Gail Kim was a tremendously accomplished talent years ahead of the North American in-ring standard. If you have seen a video of her early training days, you would even call her a prodigy. She had incredible speed, agility, and poise. There was this snap, this aggression and fire to everything she did. Yet to Vince, she was just a flash-in-the-pan star, and made sure that any chance that she had of breaking out of the Divas mold that he'd made was snuffed out instantly. After months and months of absolute billy, Gail Kim finally took matters into her own hands, actively refusing to be part of the machine that ground her and other women down by eliminating herself immediately on a battle royale in 2011 before shortly quitting. It was effectively a giant middle finger caught on camera. Number 3. Dean Ambrose. The Dean Ambrose Chronicle is a fascinating watch, a gripping blend of the work and the shoot that documented a complex and fascinating man that stood in astonishing contrast to the cartoon that he played on television. And watching it now, it's even more fascinating. It's a documentary that sought to capture Dean Ambrose's return to WWE, but in reality, it's about Jon Moxley's exit. It captures Moxley pissed off at the process, accusing the team behind it of trying to dictate his narrative. I'm not going to manufacture some answer for you. Go find somebody else and go give him a script. He's essentially on Talk is Jericho before the material drove him over the edge to even appear on Talk is Jericho. The very first minute is loaded in damning subtext as Moxley, bustling with the furious energy that he would later apply to his awesome New Japan and AEW runs, projects everything simmering within him onto the crew. I just want it to be over. I just want to get back to being in the ring. Get back to doing what I'm doing. As he later told Chris Jericho on that incendiary podcast appearance, he didn't know that it wasn't the WWE ring that he actually wanted to get back into. Number 2. CM Punk. The Championship Ascension ceremony of December the 9th, 2013 was a stark illustration of the attitude that eventually threatened WWE's monopoly by the decade's end. Held in front of various former champions to promote John Cena and Randy Orton's world title unification match, the fans in attendance did not give a which was absolutely priceless in its dissonance. WWE talked up the ancient rivalry as if it was going to be this special thing on the grand tapestry, but all the fans cared about was Daniel Bryan, which completely flummoxed Triple H as he faltered in his in-ring warbling. However, the best moment of this absolute farce came from CM Punk, who at this point was so utterly done with the WWE that he wasn't even trying to hide it. As Stephanie McMahon praised her husband as the pinnacle of the great talents in the ring, you can see him finally release his last remaining and laughed to himself. His wits were gone, and so was he shortly after. And number 1, Hangman Page. So this last entry is actually a kayfabe diversion that illustrates the power of AEW's deft long-term storytelling. At All Out, Hangman Page lost the opportunity to become the inaugural AEW World Champion. On the subsequent Being the Elite, he was absolutely despondent. The Young Bucks tried to console him, but he received it as an obligation on their part. Page tried to play the role of a top breakout babyface on Dynamite, but he failed. He lost a trilogy to Pac that inadvertently told 2 stories. The first match underwhelmed, but the second 2 were great. And Page, struggling, still had the potential as a top star, and to realize it, he had to leave the Elite. The grand emotional heft of this story is that Page is elite, and it's no shame for him to require the support network that he himself extended to Kenny Omega. But by overcompensating, he will one day be truly left with nothing. This whole bit is plotted and textured to such incredible dramatic effect, and every conceivable ending is bittersweet devastation, which of course makes it seminal pro wrestling. AEW's base is high as a kite on it, and it is simmered for almost a full year. So fans definitely do have the patience, it's just gotta be good.
So the PG era is over, I suppose. I mean, it's not. But there's enough rumors out there to suggest WWE is about to move back to TV-14, even if it's just so wrestlers can start saying the S-word on TV. Let's not pretend they don't love it. Starting around 2008, it has been a long old time, and even if it does tick away for a few months longer, it's still good to see what some of the PG folk are doing today. I'm Simon Miller, this is WhatCulture. Please do subscribe, and get yourself ready for the 10 precise moments when WWE PG era careers ended. Number 10, Ryback. It really did feel like Ryback was destined for a main event spot at one point. He was jacked, which makes Vince McMahon happy, and was on an undefeated streak that was gathering steam. That's why when it did fall apart, it was all quite surprising. This didn't just fall by the wayside either, it exploded. Mr. Feed Me More took on Kalisto for the US title on the Payback 2016 kickoff show, and within 24 hours he had been sent home. As it turned out, the company and the man had fallen out over future contract benefits, and on the 8th of August, he was let go for good. Ever since, Ryback has insulted them as much as possible. Go and watch this match too and notice how the cameras cut away from the former Skip Sheffield quite quickly. Clearly there had been a butting of heads already and no one knew what he was going to do. And also, for the people that come to my wrestling matches and chant, "Why back?" Well done, that's very smart. Number 9, AJ Lee. Let's never forget that AJ Lee is an all-timer. She rarely had a bad match, had an awesome gimmick, and even when she was a GM of Raw, it was a barrel of laughs. I do think she knew what she was doing. Sadly though, it sounded like her last year with WWE was no fun at all. I'm sure it didn't help that everything between the promotion and husband CM Punk was getting worse and worse, and come 2015, Lee decided this was all too much, and she called it a day. Throw in that her neck was also not in good shape, it was probably the right call. The last time we saw her on WWE TV was laughing at Naomi, who was dancing, and Paige just staring, because the trio had just defeated Natalya and the Bella Twins at the Raw after WrestleMania 31. That was a fun match too, so not the worst way to check out. And on the 3rd of April, she announced her retirement. The best news is AJ has smashed it after this and been very outspoken about the importance of mental health. Damn hero. Number 8, Vicky Guerrero. Since 2007, Vicky Guerrero has been pretty good at getting booed, mostly because she just screamed, "Excuse me," at the top of her lungs. It made you want to rip off your ears and post them to the other side of the world. She had been on TV before that, but it was here where she really came into her own, and amazingly, this lasted all the way through to 2014 when Vicky moved into a part-time role. This included a surprise entrance at the first ever Women's Royal Rumble in 2018, although she did have one last hurrah after that before signing with AEW. Brand new GM Paige asked a few of her predecessors to return to the show, meaning we had Teddy Long, John Laurinaitis, and Guerrero for a throwaway segment on the SmackDown 1000 special. If you're making notes, that was the 16th of October 2018. It does kind of feel like that will be that. Doesn't seem like there's a spot for her today. Number 7, Sin Cara. So this entry is about Sin Cara in general, not Mystico the performer. In case you don't know, Cara was played by multiple people, and all in all it was a big mess. Just ask Hunako who took over. The character did have some success when he formed with Kalisto to form the Lucha Dragons, but given how WWE treated tag teams, there was always going to be a ceiling. It's why when November 2019 rolled around and Sin was put in a match against Drew McIntyre, he got smashed. I mean, seriously. Funnily enough, it tied into rumors that Cara was a little bit done with WWE and wanted out. and the company was cool with that. He was given his walking papers on the 8th of December, just 1 month later. If you do want to go cringe today, watch the powerbomb Drew gives to him too. Flub me sideways. Number 6, Zack Ryder. Could we one day see Zack Ryder back on our WWE TV screens? I think so, you know. Feels like a situation which will work itself out. It's not like he didn't have something back in 2011 as chants rang around every arena, but because Ryder had gotten himself over and WWE didn't like that, it was quickly killed off. Zack got no proper push and was then back to where he was before. Still, you can't argue with the fact he was there for 15 years, which is an incredible stat, although this is summed up in the sense his last appearance was an 80-second loss to Bobby Lashley on the 9th of March 2020 episode of Raw. Because of course it was. A month after this, those infamous cuts came around in which Ryder was a part of, and as of today, he has not returned. Seriously though, why would he? Matt Cardona is just winning on the indie scene and in many ways is a bigger star than he ever has been. The cool part is that yes, Zack was basically in WWE for the entirety of the PG era, and what a fixture he was. He probably does want to forget about that time Kane pushed him off the entrance ramp in a wheelchair though. Number 5, Jack Swagger. Not everyone gets to go out on Raw or SmackDown as Jack Swagger is about to prove. Despite being a former world champion, WWE felt like a squash against Simon Gotch on the 2nd of November 2016 episode of Main Event was enough for the American, and then he was gone. Well, okay. Swagger did wrestle on some live events up until March next year when he was let go, but in terms of what the general public was able to see on television, was this random clash. He would go to AEW as soon as that was up and running and was smacking people in the face for real because between that he took up MMA. I suppose the dude has done alright. Number 4, CM Punk. An often talked about tale, but one with a few tidbits that have fallen by the wayside. After being chokeslammed through a table courtesy of Kane at the 2014 Royal Rumble, CM Punk arrived at Raw the next day and went and had a chat with Vince McMahon and Triple H. A combination of events had convinced Punk that it was time to go, and when his bosses disagreed, he packed his bag and he left. While we did see him as part of Fox's coverage of SmackDown as he was a pundit on TV show Backstage, CM has never been back in a WWE ring, meaning this cell job after being held through some wood really is the end of his run. If you do watch this now, you can see he's not a happy man. Punk looks totally exhausted and fed up as officials checked him over at ringside. Hindsight, we probably should just have allowed him to have a break, because for my money, he ain't ever coming back. Number 3, Bray Wyatt. This one genuinely shocked me. I don't think anybody thought Bray Wyatt was going to leave the WWE, so when it was announced on the 31st of July 2021 that he was out the door, I was stunned. What the hell is going on? This was only a few months after The Fiend was finally able to get rid of the burns that Randy Orton had caused him. But let us not forget, the Viper beat Bray at WrestleMania 37 and his pal Alexa Bliss turned on him. This led Wyatt into telling us a fresh start was around the corner. And boy, did we misinterpret that. I thought he was going to come up with a new gimmick or something. The last thing he did in WWE was wave goodbye to fans after a Firefly Funhouse, which is also fitting, I suppose. And you'd have to imagine Wyndham Rotunda was a bit fed up ever since he lost his Universal title to Goldberg. Amazingly, he hasn't been seen in any wrestling promotion since, although that could change soon. Seems like WWE is back in the cards. What a world. Number 2, Daniel Bryan. Only Daniel Bryan would go out like this. The first 4 months of 2021 were just Bryan having banger after banger with everybody he possibly could, so much so, everyone agreed that he had to be in the WrestleMania main event. This was even better because he had already been beaten by Roman Reigns, and yet even then, we all knew it had to get to Roman versus Daniel versus Edge. He really did save his best for last though, because on the 30th of April SmackDown, Bryan put his career on the line against the Tribal Chief. It evolved into a 27-minute epic that was easily one of the best all year in WWE, and it even opened the door for Cesaro to have a quick main top of the card run too. Knowing he was leaving, Daniel was beaten up by the Usos as well, as the Swiss Superman was tied up in the ropes. So yeah, the last thing fans saw was the Yes Man face down on the floor, totally unconscious. He was out by the 4th of May, and he did think about returning to WWE, but then he went and signed for AEW instead. Number 1, Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose was done when his contract came to an end. He was sick of his terrible booking as a heel and being treated like the kooky guy when he wanted to, well, be Jon Moxley. I think we can all agree he was right. This is exactly what WWE should have let him do. Knowing that no amount of money was going to tempt Ambrose, the powers that be decided to try and draw some interest by reuniting the Shield, which is why we had their final chapter on the 21st of April 2019. It did see Dean, Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins beating Baron Corbin, Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre in the main event, and it was alright. fun enough. There were some nice moments as Ambrose posed on the turnbuckles while looking at partner Renee Young, and they also embraced at ringside. And 10 days later, he was no longer legally bound to the company. We then got Double or Nothing 2019, and ever since, what a ride. Wrestling is so nuts. You can watch a wrestler have their last match in a company and have absolutely no idea. Yep. All it takes is the house of cards to collapse and poof, they're just gone. So it is time to finally give these folk their dues. Hello, my name is Simon from WhatCulture. Please do hit that subscribe button. And this is the 10 precise moments TNA careers ended. Number 10, Christian Cage. I always enjoy doing an intro and then presenting the opposite experience, but hey, that's just how we roll. Christian was such a special case though, as not only did he get to say goodbye to TNA, he got to say goodbye to Impact too. It all started on the 13th of August 2021 episode of AEW Dynamite when Cage won the Impact World title from Kenny Omega. Damn Forbidden Door was wide open and causing a breeze. It didn't last long as Christian soon dropped it to Josh Alexander at Bound for Glory, and when they were done, both champion and challenger had a big old hug. They knew the deal, the journey had come to an end. If you're interested in how it finished in 2008, well, it was the most TNA thing ever. Kurt Angle had learned that Cage's contract was expiring and that he was heading back to WWE, so the main event Mafia beat him up. We may as well have just had an advert for Raw on the screen. Number 9, Bobby Roode. Try this the next time you see somebody who you think is a TNA fan. Just shout beer at the top of your lungs, and if they don't reply with money, you've made a terrible mistake, and they now think you're nuts. This, of course, is a reference to the tag team in the promotion consisting of Bobby Roode and James Strong, and when they lost a Valley of Shadows match to Decay at Sacrifice 2016, things didn't look good. I mean, that brawl was crazy to begin with, and due to the way TNA filmed its content, we already knew Roode was leaving, as he had announced it a month earlier. Whoops. He still got quite the send-off as Abyss chokeslammed him into some thumbtacks, and the entire faction just punished his ass. So fair play to Bobby. He went out in the tried and tested manner, and he did the honors as best he could. Still secretly hoping he gets one last push in WWE. The dude has so much to give. Number 8, Booker T. It was not the best evening for Booker T at TNA Bound for Glory 2009. He was involved in the Full Metal Mayhem tag match where he was teaming with Scott Steiner, and he got whooped so bad he was carted out on a stretcher. The craziest part is that this would be the last time we saw the master of the Spinneroonie, even though at the time he was one half of the tag team champions. But yes, his contract had expired and he was done, but nobody was overly aware of this, so in the story, he had basically been killed. Booker did return for a one-off house show in 2010 where he took on Rob Van Dam, and wouldn't you know it, soon afterwards he was back on Raw as a commentator, almost like that was his plan. Once again though, fair play to the book. He too went out on his ass. You have got to respect it. Number 7, Bully Ray. In 2015, Dixie Carter walked onto TNA TV and told us that we had a new general manager, and it was none other than Bully Ray. And then I think this lasted 3 weeks. Yep. Because that went down in July, and by August, Ray was shown backstage selling an attack, as we were all asked who was responsible for this. If it was meant to lead to a match, it never did, and days after this, the Dudley Boys were back on Raw. I am not kidding. It was so strange even if you were an avid watcher because there wasn't even a hint that this was going to happen. Bully just turned up to work for a month and then kind of decided he couldn't be bothered anymore. I'm worried that this wouldn't have been the first time. Number 6, Sting. Do you want to know reason number 456 why I love Sting? Well, here we go. In January 2014, the Stinger had decided it was time to walk away from TNA, so got put in a career versus title match against Magnus. It felt very much like the Icon wasn't going to win, but that would mean he was stepping away from the promotion, so the emotion was ready to explode. The fight itself was essentially a greatest hits for Sting, which I appreciated, and after Magnus had toppled the legend, he, EC3 and Dixie Carter stood over his fallen body as if they'd stolen all his wrestling energy and were now twice as strong. Much like others on this list, it was Steve Borden ensuring he put over as many people as possible on his way out, which just sums him up. No fuss, doing the right thing, he's a damn hero. Nobody would have minded if we had done a big celebration and thank you, Sting, but nope, that wasn't what he wanted, and his opponents benefited greatly because of it. Number 5, Drew McIntyre. Let's be honest here. When Drew McIntyre popped up in TNA for a cup of coffee, I don't think anybody thought he was going to be the WWE champion 3 years later. He was smashing it, don't get me wrong, but Drew Galloway in 2017 had been released, and it seemed like he was on a new path. He didn't have a good day when he took on Moose in an Impact Grand match because even though he was the champion, he wouldn't be after this. he was about to lose. It seemed obvious that everybody involved knew he was moving on, as this was sold as if it was the end of the world. Although it did create quite the moment, sad faces all around. Everything was going to be alright for Drew, however. A few months later, he was back in NXT, and he went on to do very good things before Gail Kim. Gail Kim's first retirement came in 2018 on an independent show in the UK, and as cool as that was, it was not fitting for somebody who had absolutely smashed it. She had been instrumental in moving women's wrestling forward, and given how much Kim had given to Impact, it seemed only right they could do something on that platform. Therefore, she returned to the ring for one night only at the Rebellion pay-per-view in 2019 to fight Tessa Blanchard, and as ever after a solid match, Gail did the honors, passed the torch, and strolled off into the sunset. Kim was clearly emotional after the fact, as was Tessa, and the embrace they shared afterwards was pretty powerful. Gail has remained with the company ever since in a non-wrestler role, and even though a bunch of people have asked her to return, as of yet she has resisted, and I have a feeling it may stay that way. Number 3, Samoa Joe. We just talked about some shows in the UK though, and it was on a TNA one where Samoa Joe did say goodbye to the promotion. It was on Impact on the 20th of March 2015 where he went toe-to-toe with Austin Aries. Due to that actually being filmed in January, in between those dates, Joe announced that he'd be leaving. The last thing we saw was Samoa sliding into the ring to chase away Rockstar Spud, who was celebrating winning the X Division title shortly after Joe's match was over, and given that the Samoan submission machine lost by DQ, he wasn't happy. This did feel a little bit anticlimactic given how important the man had been to the company, but like many on this list, a few months later, where did Joe pop up? NXT. Number 2, Kurt Angle. So this one is wild now, all things considered, but Kurt Angle last appeared on Impact in March 2016 where he was beaten by Bobby Lashley. Wrestling is bonkers. It certainly felt like Angle's plan was to go back to WWE after this, or at least that was the rumor, but instead he went and worked a bunch of indie dates before finally getting the call to be Raw GM a few months after. When you remember that his TNA run was longer than his one in WWE, you could have gone on out with this had you wanted to, but no. He lost, he went away, and that was that. Madness. Number 1, AJ Styles. As was this, because it was so stupid. AJ Styles is one of the first names that come to your head when you think of TNA, and he helped that promotion like crazy. He had been there since 2002 as well, so it was even more ridiculous that when we got to 2014, the powers that be didn't realize how important Styles was to everything. In terms of how it bowed out, it was on the 9th of January Impact in a title versus title match when quite literally everybody got involved to beat the crap out of Styles, so he lost. And again, that was that. We never saw him again. If that sounds weird, however, it's because there were backstage issues. Amazingly, Impact only offered AJ 60% of his current salary to stay, and surprisingly, he said no, went to New Japan, and smashed it so hard, he got hired by WWE and became the world champion. So this was one of the silliest contracts in wrestling history. Always know your worth.
All good things must come to an end. It can be true all it likes, but that phrase hurts. Nobody likes letting go of the good times, and no one enjoys seeing great wrestling gimmicks die. It's inevitable though. WWE's ever-changing creative brain trusts aren't the only ones to blame for these nosedives though. Sometimes the performers themselves took missteps, either through boredom or because they believed it was time to try something new. Some recovered to have significant success after the initial brilliance of their characters faded. Others, not so much. I'm Gareth from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 precise moments WWE's best ever gimmicks stopped working. Number 10, Razor Ramon. There was no going back when Vince McMahon introduced Rick Bogner as the new version of Razor Ramon in late 1996. Bogner as Razor somehow sticks out more in the mind than Glenn Jacobs as Fake Diesel too, if only because Jacobs went on to bigger and better things after this debacle. Raymond 2.0? He melted into obscurity and is only useful as a reminder that wrestling can be absolutely terrible at times. This is a weird one in that the original guy under the gimmick wasn't actually involved. Scott Hall had toddled off to WCW and launched the uber cool NWO by the time Bogner played dress up, and gamely tried his best to convince WWF hardcores that he was the real deal. Nobody took it seriously, and it remains one of the promotion's most shameful embarrassments. As soon as Jim Ross welcomed Razor Ramon with open arms on a September 96 episode of Raw, it was like a wet fart. Jerry Lawler's comments on commentary that this cosplayer looks a little bigger than the last time I saw him didn't help either. Number 9, John Cena. Few acts were hotter than bad boy rapper John Cena when he caught fire in 2003/4. His explicit rap lines, thuggish mentality, and Eminem with muscles appearance captured the imagination of an audience still seeking someone with that same old attitude. Cena became the poster boy for ruthless aggression. Then he said fudge it and changed. All of a sudden, that tough exterior, the gangster looks, and all of Cena's menace was replaced by a goofy smile, an ever-changing wardrobe of garish t-shirts and caps, and an altogether more wholesome image. This was an overnight change for Cena, and it was totally deliberate. He didn't feel comfortable playing the character when he noticed more kids and young families in the WWE crowds. So Cena told Vince he'd be switching things up from now on and projecting a more family-friendly persona on TV. That eventually was in line with the organization's PG certification. But there was an awkward period before that when happy, smiling Cena was at odds with his own gimmick. Number 8, Doink the Clown. The Doink heel gimmick Matt Bourne played from 1992 to 93 was stunning stuff. It was creepy, it was mysterious, and it was clear that Bourne was one hell of a worker between the ropes. Everything was going so well for the character. Bruce Pritchard even admitted on his podcast that he wanted bigger things for Doink creatively. When things suddenly turned sour. Bourne, riddled with personal problems and substance issues, left the WWF, but the company didn't want to abandon the Doink character. Instead of picking up another solid heel to fill the role though, they turned Doink babyface, gave him a sidekick called Dink, and played both off as fun-loving pranksters who only wanted to entertain the kids. The entire Doink persona was butchered by this development, and it'd never recover. It was dead as soon as Bourne wiped off the grease paint and hung up his green wig for the very last time. Number 7, Becky Lynch. What the hell is happening to Becky Lynch? When Bex first cut those scathing promos as The Man in 2018, she was a revelation. Comparisons were made between her hard-nosed presentation and former favourites like Stone Cold Steve Austin, and everyone tipped over one another to buy into Becky's new gimmick. Today, Lynch seems lost and totally unsure on where she should take her character next. When she's not wearing gimmicky sunglasses and stealing Jerry Lawler's crown, she's making overly heelish remarks and pretending to be some sports entertainment version of UFC box office smash Conor McGregor. It's not working, unfortunately. As soon as Lynch strayed from the straight-laced heroine of before and started acting like some trash with cash self-hype train, her importance dipped. Now what should be a straight-ahead winner of a story between her and Shayna Baszler at WrestleMania 36 is in real danger of falling off a cliff. Number 6, The Fiend. Bray Wyatt's Fiend piqued everyone's interest when the Masked Nightmare's twisted creativity first popped up in the spring months of 2019. As a split personality who ghosted between children's TV host and Freddy Krueger-esque monster, Bray was in his element. All WWE had to do was uphold their end of the bargain. But of course, they couldn't. Think of this as a 3-part disaster. First, Wyatt's Fiend was booked in a feud with the then top babyface Seth Rollins. That was trouble from the get-go. Bray couldn't lose so early in his run under a new character, and Seth had nothing to gain from fighting someone fans found so fresh and exciting. Then WWE booked a non-finish inside Hell in a Cell. After this, WWE then decided to give this supernatural attraction the Universal title. That all equated to a damning series of miscalculations from the writers, and painted Bray's vibrant gimmick into a corner. Now he'd have to lose. The company didn't have any choice, he wasn't going to hold the belt forever. Cue Goldberg, cue mass dissatisfaction, cue demotion down the card. Number 5, Kane. From one supernatural demon's woes to another. Kane was an imposing blast of Taker-opposing muscle when he debuted in late 1997. The original tale was fanciful, sure, but it was at least easy to follow. Kane had returned to avenge his parents and destroy his own brother. Sold. Rather than sticking to this simple origin story, WWE messed around with Kane's history until it was almost unrecognizable. What's worse is they humanized the monster, had him ignore damaged vocal cords to cut promos, initially with a voice box, and gave him an on-screen girlfriend. Tori couldn't resist agonizing personal turmoil or singed flesh, apparently. I mean, who can? The character's presentation was too convoluted by 1999. Moments like Kane bagging Tori and forcing out a quick suck it for DX fans everywhere completely shattered his early threat. Yes, gimmicks evolve, but this was too much, especially when WWE went back and rearranged some of the pieces again later on. Number 4, Goldust. If you have any children who stumble across Sable Dust on the WWE network, good luck. Here's a quick PSA. Goldust's entire artist formerly known as experimental phase from 1997 to 1998 should be avoided generally by anyone with kids. It's just a bad time for everyone. The golden outfits of before were replaced with increasingly more out there attires, and Luna Vachon's stint as Goldie's pal was more intense than the average roller coaster ride. This was not a banner period for Dustin Rhodes, nor was it progressive in a good way. The artist, formerly known as Goldust, killed the original's genius play on psychological mind games and sexual prejudice. It wasn't a running commentary on anything in particular and was weird for the sake of being weird. When Goldust first took steps away from his blonde hair, golden pants, and dazzling costumes in favour of oddity mismatched garbage, people stopped paying attention to him as much, which is just really sad. Number 3, Mankind. Mick Foley's breakthrough guy stands out on this list because the end seemed to be the wrestler's own choice. On a January 2000 episode of SmackDown, Mick's Mankind interrupted Royal Rumble opponent Triple H's promo with a special announcement. Trips wouldn't be facing the masked guy with a white shirt and tie inside MSG. No, he'd be meeting the craziest and most dangerous of all Foley's 3 faces, Cactus Jack. That, amazingly, was one of the last times fans saw Mankind on WWE television. After he ripped off the mask and shirt to reveal that Wanted Dead t-shirt and angry face, Mick only really looked back for a token appearance or two, like his oft-forgotten match with Carlito at Taboo Tuesday 2005. Aside from that, he exclusively showed up as himself or Cactus. Mankind was pretty much a goner. Maybe Foley thought the gimmick had run its course. He did fancy retiring for good in 2000, so that adds up. And it surely would have been more prevalent on nostalgia shows if Mick was still digging the mask. Number 2, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold was the blueprint for pro wrestling's sea of change in the mid to late 90s. His rebellious character was one fans could live vicariously through, and millions lined Steve Austin's pockets by buying those simple but effective Austin 316 t-shirts. Then they downed beers along with him as he hit stunners and made Mr. McMahon's life a misery. As I said in the intro though, all good things must come to an end. By 2001, Austin obsessively pursued The Rock's WWF title and told the world he'd do anything to win at WrestleMania X7. That's why he sided with old enemy McMahon and shook hands with the devil himself, another world-class Jim Ross commentary call, after the match. That right there is when Stone Cold went, well, stone cold. Austin evolved into a cowardly McMahon sympathizer who acted paranoid around everyone, played most of his promos for laughs and begged off from babyfaces. Some skits were a riot, but they didn't please fans who yearned for the old rattlesnake. He'd been defined by that Vince bashing for so long that things felt strange without it. Number 1, The Undertaker. As kids, some of us adored the American Badass. Seeing him ride out to Kid Rock's tune at Judgment Day 2000 and maul everyone in his path got the blood pumping. And things got even cooler when Limp Bizkit's Rollin' replaced Rock. This was a successful repackaged job from a legend. It wasn't actually The Undertaker, however. All that mystique had been sucked away so the character could become more realistic. This biker had a real life away from the ring. Taker now had a wife, friends, hobbies, and wasn't some superhuman force running rule over the business anymore. Nope, he was a locker room leader who chewed tobacco and rode Harleys everywhere he went. Taker would eventually return to his origins in 2004, but that 4-year stretch of American Badass, Big Evil, and Booger Red domination sticks out as some sort of fever dream spin-off. It's almost like it never happened at all, and it had next to nothing to do with his Western mortician cum satanic overlord first run.
It is kind of tough telling somebody else they should retire. Take The Undertaker, who we shall talk about later. He gave 30 years of his life to pro wrestling. If he wants to fight until his teeth are falling out and his hair is grey, then more power to him. The flip side to this is capturing that magic moment in a bottle. Every now and then a very obvious occasion comes along that screams, "This is the perfect time to walk away!" And yet the individual in question does not. Again, sometimes it's only with hindsight that this becomes apparent, but still, nobody wants to overstay their welcome, and trying to find that balance is harder than a Rubik's Cube. Unless you're one of those people who can smash those out in a minute, how the hell do you do it? I'm Simon from WhatCulture. Please do hit that subscribe button. It's free, and this is 10 precise moments wrestlers should have retired. Number 10, The Undertaker, Extreme Rules 2019. One of the all-time greats, which I don't think anybody can argue. The whole thing with the dead man was he wanted to find that perfect moment to walk away, but never really felt like it came his way. He desired that ultimate exit so it matched up to his career, and always assumed it would come when he had his next match. People always shout that this ruins his legacy, but I don't buy into that. Do I like the original Star Wars films less because of the prequels? No, and it's the same here. I remember his feuds with Kane, Shawn Michaels and Triple H. or the time he threw Mankind, a human being, off the top of Hell in a Cell. I don't care that he had a rubbish fight with Goldberg in Saudi Arabia. I can forget about that. Like He-Man, I have the power. A good time to have hung them up in terms of his performance living up to expectations was definitely Extreme Rules 2019 though. Everything fell into place to make it one of those nights, including a hot crowd and an out-of-nowhere tag team of Taker with Roman Reigns, who were going against Drew McIntyre and Shane McMahon. In short, the Phenom was great throughout all of this, and the audience lapped it up. It rocked. You kind of get the feeling he thought the same if you've seen his reaction to it in the Last Ride documentary, but alas, there was more to come. I'll take that given what else Mark Calloway gave us. It was a very enjoyable run. Number 9, Ric Flair at WrestleMania 24. Ric Flair's retirement build and actual retirement under the WWE banner was near perfect, and if that had been the end, it would have rounded off one of the best careers ever. Flair found an extra win during his Lose and Vince McMahon Will Boot You Out of Wrestling tour, and given that his final boss awaited at the biggest show of the year and was called Shawn Michaels, well, it was bloody fantastic. Go and watch this now if you've never seen it. You'll never think that Nature Boy is 60 years old. It is one hell of a performance. A huge reason for this too was the story. Fans didn't want Flair to retire. Flair definitely didn't want to retire, so it was just life being life. It meant it had to happen, and when HBK said that he loved Rick and was sorry before hitting him right in the face, that is Pro Wrestling 101 right there. Flair's love for the industry meant he couldn't live up to this stipulation and decided to go and wrestle in TNA for a few years, and again, it's just one of those things. Given wrestling had been his entire life, it's no real surprise he struggled to let it go. Even he has said this likely wasn't the best idea, but if you're ever frustrated about this decision, just go and watch any Flair versus Steamboat match. You'll be over it instantly. Number 8, Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam 2006. Technically, Hulk Hogan still hasn't retired, and the Hulkster is always rumoured to be wanting one last match. That should never happen given how badly injured his back is, but amazingly, I still wouldn't be surprised if somehow it did. So with that in mind, we need to go through Hogan's last matches to find out which one lived up to the legacy he had created. I mean, he changed pro wrestling twice. Who else can say that? No disrespect to TNA, but it doesn't live there, and really in terms of the spectacle and the opponent, it's probably when he went head-to-head with none other than Randy Orton at SummerSlam 2006. This was also his last match in the WWE, which is far more fitting, and while if we had known this, maybe he would have done the honours, there's also a huge chance that he wouldn't have done, because, you know, he's Hulk Hogan. Orton did have his hand raised before the referee reversed his decision after Hulk's foot was found to be on the ropes during the 3 count, and a leg drop seconds later meant this all turned around. Still, even with that, it would have been great as a proper send-off. Today, not so much. Number 7, Bret Hart at WCW Nitro, October 4th, 1999. When Bret Hart tangled with Vince McMahon at WrestleMania in 2010, it was certainly nothing to write home about. Hearing the Hitman talk about it will actually give you a new take on this, however, as he was so proud of what he achieved given what he had been through beforehand, and in that sense, it is something. When you think of Bret Hart though, you think of one of the best wrestlers ever, and that should have been how he walked away, reminding everybody that he's the flipping man. So once again, we go into the past to find the right time to do that, and really it would have been on WCW Nitro in October of 1999 when he took on Chris Benoit in a tribute match to his brother Owen. Not only did it have that extra emotional kick, but the action and tone of this were pretty damn incredible. 2 skilled technicians proving to everyone that they were without a doubt some of the most skilled in the world. The real kicker here was that WCW just had no clue what to do with Bret Hart, so he suffered through no fault of his own. That's why looking back can be so powerful. Nobody could have known what was going to come after this, especially with the fact Hart had already been through so damn much. Number 6, Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 26. This one seems a little unfair, because if someone came to your house now with a bag of money to work 20 minutes, you'd do it, no matter what other promises you'd made. No one is going to turn that down, but after years of staying in the wilderness after retiring at WrestleMania 26 following that barn burner with The Undertaker, HBK was offered this truckload of cash to head to Saudi Arabia and the Crown Jewel event in 2018. I mean, the end result was a disaster, and they're not my words, they're the words of the people in the damn thing. For one reason or another, this fell apart on every level. Triple H tore his pec, Kane's mask was knocked off for the first time ever, which is quite something given he debuted in 1997, The Undertaker wasn't in the right frame of mind, and while Michaels was okay, that was about it. And okay for one of the best in-ring performers ever is simply not good enough. Much like Taker, this is almost a forgotten memory now, and I doubt he's ever gonna do it again. Number 5, CM Punk at the Royal Rumble 2014, which at the moment is exactly what he did. When CM Punk was done at the 2014 Royal Rumble, he went to Raw the next day, told WWE to stick it, left, and has never returned. Given who his character was, This was pretty much spot on. I mean, look at it this way. Punk always presented himself as an anti-company guy and one who obviously lived his life like a punk rocker would. It's my life, my way, and if you don't like it, you can kiss my ass. We all get excited about the idea of him returning because he was a major star, but this was almost the best way for him to exit. He created headlines, he left people reeling, a lot of management seething. He took his gimmick all the way to its natural conclusion. If he did come back too, you know that WWE would do something ridiculous. I mean, even when Punk was the hottest thing in wrestling, they couldn't help themselves. With everything that's happened since, there's no way this would be simple or straightforward. So his retirement came after he was held out the Rumble, basically then flipped everyone off. I love it. Number 4, Mick Foley at WrestleMania 22. You can take what we've already said about a lot of people in this list and apply it to Mick Foley, but my word did we come close. If it wasn't for a TNA run, who knows what the deal would have been, but again, wrestling is a hard bug to let go. Foley's story is incredible regardless, given that Vince McMahon once told Jim Ross that he would never hire that guy, and then a few years later, that guy was winning the WWF title on Raw. He also proved to be amazingly versatile, shifting from serious to comedy to hardcore to sports entertainment guru, and basically, Mick Foley was brilliant. If you want to talk about when he properly smashed it out of the park one last time, it would have to be during his war with Edge at WrestleMania 22 when, yes, the pair went flying through a flaming table. As you do. It was a great reminder that not only was Foley a damn hero, but he was the king of making stars. Much in the same way as he had assisted others, Edge walked away from this feeling like a much bigger deal. A good guy from top to bottom, I'm pretty sure that technically his final match came against Jonathan Coachman on SmackDown. In a way, that is beautiful. Number 3, Kane at the Royal Rumble 2018. I forgot that Kane and Finn Balor had a feud. That was so weird. It also saw the Big Red Machine beat Finn to head into the Rumble as 1/3 of the WWE title match alongside Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman. The thing is, if you were a long-time fan of Kane, there was this feeling that if he did win and become the champ, it wouldn't have been so bad. I think deep down we knew that The Undertaker's brother didn't have that many matches left. Furthermore, this was actually alright, and while Kane would be pinned after a second F5 onto a steel chair, if he had gotten up, taken his bow and walked off, it would have been fitting. The man himself has said he doesn't know if he's going to get a proper send-off anytime soon, but I really hope he does. Maybe the reason that hasn't happened, however, is because he feels like he's not done in the ring. I'm not sure what else we could do with that character as he's done everything. Perhaps he would like to chokeslam somebody else through their parents' grave. Number 2, The Big Show at WWE Raw on September 4th, 2017. The Big Show magically turned back up on WWE TV in 2020, and then he vanished again. We likely haven't seen the last of him either, especially as he had that match with Drew McIntyre after WrestleMania 36. The concept was weird, but as for his performance, yeah, it's pretty good. We've already established our criteria for this list, however, which is why a great time to have gone out with a bang was when he had that nut steel cage match with Braun Strowman in 2017. Those two kicked the crap out of each other. It was also designed to put Strowman on the map, something Show went out of his way to do. Not only did he lose after the power slam, but Braun grabbed him after the fact and threw him through the side of the steel as a defiant, "This is my wrestling promotion now!" know he would have shouted it too, that's all he does. The one good thing about the Big Show carrying on is what it does leave on the table. Nobody has turned as much as he has, often going from good guy to bad guy within the same evening, so as a nice end, he should do this during his final match. He starts as a face, he finishes as a heel, he then goes face again when he says goodbye. Don't pretend you wouldn't enjoy it. Number 1, Triple H at WrestleMania 30. Triple H doesn't force himself on TV or even guarantee a match at WrestleMania, but in terms of what would have been an incredible end to his in-ring career, that's WrestleMania 30. His part in the Daniel Bryan Joyfest that night was clear for all to see, and getting wrecked in both the opener and when he tried to interfere in the main event was great. WWE took a winding road to get to that point, but we got there in the end. Aside from that, if this had gone down, we never would have moved forward 12 months to the now very controversial Sting vs Triple H match at WrestleMania 31. Just a bizarre outing all things considered. Seeing Sting lose in one of his few WWE matches was ludicrous, even more so as he got hit with a sledgehammer and didn't really care. Whatever, who gives a damn? Bouts against Seth Rollins were better but not really memorable, and while he did his best with Roman Reigns, that one was out of his hands. Nobody could have fixed that. I will say that his Mania 35 bout is a guilty pleasure of mine, just because I know how much Batista wanted that match and how happy I was that he got it. If you watch it through those eyes, it's really heartwarming. The real downer would have been not getting that mixed tag at WrestleMania where Ronda Rousey lit up the arena, and for that reason alone, this can all be debated, but still. If we're talking about the time-honored traditions of the business, the game laying it all down after a new star was born would have been poetic.
We all make mistakes, as my parents tell me every single day, but 9 times out of 10, you can kind of just move on with this and get on with your life. But on occasion, it may actually affect your career. Which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Hello, my name is Simon from WhatCulture. Thank you for joining me. And this is 10 exact moments WWE killed careers. Number 10, Dr. Death gets knocked out. Now, if you don't know, the Brawl for All tournament that happened in the late 90s was basically designed to get Dr. Death over. He'd been brought in for Japan, and Jim Ross especially thought, well, if we can make him appeal to the WWE universe, he could be a good opponent for Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, if you know about the Brawl for All and the fact that it was a proper shoot fight, you'll ask yourself, well, it's wrestling. Why the hell didn't they just work this? You tell me. Because the problem was when Dr. Death came up against Bart Gunn, Bart was like, well, I want to win the Brawl for All. That may be great for my career. It wasn't. It was basically the end of him too. He punched the Doc right in the face. He was knocked out. And this whole thing was done. And you also had the fallout from this, because Bart Gunn had always been presented as a tag team wrestler, so when it was him that sparked out our great new hope, every single audience member went, well, now I don't believe in that guy because of everything that's come before this. Death then vanished from TV for ages, although he did come back in early 1999, but soon after that, he was gone from the company. So this didn't help his WWE stint at all. Number 9, the Spirit Squad gets sent packing. I will never understand this one, because while the Spirit Squad were an interesting gimmick, at least they did their job. They went out to the ring, they danced around going, wee, and everybody wanted to boo them. They also got into a feud with D-Generation X, which was fine for what it was. But at some stage, the powers that be decided, oh no, we've done too much with the Spirit Squad, so they quite literally sent them packing back to developmental. Because on the 27th of November 2006 Raw, Triple H and Shawn Michaels quite literally put them in a box, I'm not kidding, stuck an address on it that was like send to OVW, and then they walked off just chuckling away. And do you know what happened to the Spirit Squad after this? They all fell by the wayside, apart from Dolph Ziggler, who was Nicky, I believe. He was able to swim his way back in. So yeah, tying into this list, it was basically the end of their time in WWE, and I don't get why they did this. The Spirit Squad was fine. Number 8, Gene Snitsky likes feet. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? In 2005, all of a sudden Snitsky told us he was into feet. And there was a bunch of backstage segments where he was rubbing people's feet. There were some other backstage segments where he wanted to rub somebody's foot and that person said no and he was disappointed. I mean, was this going to main event WrestleMania? No. It gets even worse because there is an interview out there with Nick Dinsmore, who played Eugene, where he was asked about this and he said the idea was born out of the fact that the real Gene Snitsky was massively into Tootsie Toes. I don't want to talk about this anymore, so we're going on to the next one. Number 7, Hornswoggle is the anonymous GM. On the 9th of July 2012 episode of Raw, we were finally told that the anonymous GM of Raw was Hornswoggle. Now, if you were not around for this period, the damn anonymous GM storyline had been going on for so long that it would have to have been, I don't know, The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin or someone of that magnitude for it to be justified. And when it was Hornswoggle and it was played off like a joke, well, that was the end. And the only reason we did do this is because we didn't actually have a payoff for the angle, and fans were so mad they needed somebody to vent at. And poor Swogs was a target for obvious reasons. And what really sucked about this is that by and large, most people actually quite enjoyed Fit Finley's son. He was a bit ha-ha, funny, but after this, there was no going back. So as ever, if you are going to write a story, make sure you know what the ending is. Don't just make it up as you go along, otherwise you get this. Number 6, the fake Razor Ramon debuts. I mean, what was Rick Bogner going to do? I bet he had trained for hours and I bet he was over the moon to get a WWF contract, and then Vince McMahon told him, you know that guy we just got rid of, well, we own his character and we own his gimmick, so we just gonna give it to you. It meant when he did debut after Jim Ross introduced him, he had to be all like, yo man, I'm Razor Ramon, even though every single person in the audience and the entire world knew he wasn't Razor Ramon. Glenn Jacobs also gets thrown into this mix because he was introduced as fake Diesel, but have you seen Glenn Jacobs? He is massive. He is like a legit 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", so he was always gonna find some place in professional wrestling, but Rick needed something else, and instead he got this. Do not forget too, when Kane finally did arrive, he was wearing a mask, so nobody made this association. honestly, is one of the worst ideas ever. Like, imagine someone just replaced me now and, hi, I'm Simon Miller. You'd be like, no, you're not. And the same guy would be like, well, no, I actually am. Unless it's like a perfect clone, it is doomed to fail. Number 5, Rocco Rex Hawk. Even Bret Hart on kayfabe commentaries has talked about this, but for some reason in 1992, WWF's big plan for the Legion of Doom was for their manager Paul Ellering to have a hand puppet named Rocco. And when Hawk found out about this, quite understandably, he completely melted down. The best part about all of this is that if you go watch an interview from the man around this era, anytime that puppet pops up, you can see it in his face. I actually think he wants to hit him. So it was like this, and that's right, I got a puppet of my own, but Hawk would stand there and just do this. There's also stories out there that after SummerSlam 1992, Hawk was so annoyed by all of this, he went on a massive bender, and I don't know about that, but imagine you had to play a big tough guy, and then you got to talk to a puppet. Number 4, the gobbledygooker. I mean, what else are we meant to do? Survivor Series 1990, after weeks of build, the WWF promised us something massive, something huge, a massive surprise was going to come out of this giant egg, and it was just somebody dressed as a turkey. Now, the incredible bit is that Vince McMahon actually thought that this would be the new mascot of the World Wrestling Federation, because Nintendo had Mario and Sonic had Sega. Why couldn't we have one? And what he came up with was that. There'll be a picture right there. I mean, that will give you nightmares. It was awful for Hector Guerrero as well, who was the person underneath this suit. And he was a really good wrestler. And oh, to be a fly on the wall when they came up with this. Surely at least one person said, excuse me, I don't think that we should be doing it. And surprise, surprise, when we realized how bad it was, Hector couldn't land another job in WWE. Obvious reasons. Number 3, Lance Storm is boring. I hated this one, I hated it then, and I hated it now. If you have listened to Lance Storm talk about professional wrestling in 2022, he has such an incredible mind for the business that everybody should have been walking up to him in the 90s and 2000s going, please, Mr. Storm, can you help me be better? But for some reason, Vince McMahon didn't see it this way, and he decided that Lance Storm was boring. To the point that during one of his matches, out came Stone Cold Steve Austin with a microphone and said, you know, we should probably end this, Lance, because you are sending me to sleep. So who the hell was going to care about Lance Storm after this when the company was saying, yeah, we don't really think that you should care about this guy? Then they tried to turn it around by teaming him with Goldust and have him dance around a little bit. But Lance Storm doesn't need to dance. He just needs to wrestle because, again, he was so damn good. So if Lance Storm ever sees this, you get a salute from me, you're a hero. Number 2, Rikishi did it for The Rock. Do you remember how over Rikishi was? If you don't, go back to 1999 or 2000, wait until you hear the Too Cool music, meow, 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 that weird little noise, and then wait for the crowd pop. People love this guy. So it made all the sense in the world that eventually we're going to try and push him to the main event level, but who in their right mind went, right, listen, just 1 second. You know how popular Rikishi is with his massive ass? Why don't we turn him into a bad guy? And why don't we have him responsible for running over Stone Cold Steve Austin? This was all revealed on the 9th of October 2000 Raw when then GM Mick Foley said it was you, Rikishi. And honestly, the nonsense that came out of his mouth with the final thing being, I did it for The Rock. And do we know, even in 2022, why he did it for The Rock? We have no flubbing idea. It was fumbled so badly that Keish was moved out the way so Triple H could take this spot. And it was just a downward spiral after this, and soon he was released as well. I mean, Rikishi should have been there for years, but no, we had to come up with this. Number 1, DDP is the stalker. Even Diamond Dallas Page has talked about this one and how stupid it was, because seriously, if you had watched DDP in WCW at all, why would he go to the WWF and stalk The Undertaker and his wife? Let's think about it for a few seconds. Nope, there is no answer. I mean, nothing about this repackage made any sense. It was like Vince McMahon just had this gimmick on a window shelf and was waiting to give it to someone, and then DDP happened to turn up, so he pushed two things together, even though that should never have happened to begin with. And seriously too, Page's career in the WWF never really recovered after this. Like, he did do all those fun skits with Christian, but this was Diamond Dallas Page, and if you had treated him right, he could have had a world title run, and I don't think anybody would have been complaining. It doesn't matter because today DDP is a damn legend and goes around saving people's lives, and he has DDPY, which is really good. I do it a couple of times a week. But yeah, this was such a bad move and took DDP in the World Wrestling Federation and sent him on a course to nothing.